Well, for a change, the sun is shining in Belgium, and we go a long way back to remember such an occasion. It is the 86th running of the Tour de Flanders. Hello again, everybody. I'm Phil Liggett, and welcome along to this video from World Cycling Productions on this great race. Indeed, the greatest race, which is in Belgium, and it began back in 1913. And you know, the Belgians don't like to lose on their own roads. 61 times they've been victorious here, and very few other countries have managed to break in. But this so far has been the Italians' year, and there are plenty of good Italians here now to take on the few stars from Belgium. But more importantly, I think for us all, US Postal are here, and here in strength. Lance Armstrong saying he's here to ride for George Hincapie, who has great form. But you know, I reckon if Lance gets the chance, he'll try to win for himself as well. There are plenty of other good bike riders, and back is our old favourite. Back for the first time in 15 years, the Koppenberg. Yes, it's been resurfaced, but resurfaced with cobblestones. And this is a great course for those who want to win big bike races. 264 kilometres, there are 16 climbs, and the last climb coming just before the finish. Well, before we go to the action, we can now join Paul Sherwin. He's in amongst it in the square, talking to the riders as usual.
Well, Georgie, this is the day you've been waiting for, and quite an amazing year this year because Lance has decided to come down here and help you at the Tour of Flanders.
Yeah, Lance has made a big commitment in changing the schedule around a bit for me, and I'm really excited. I've worked really hard for this week coming up, so I'm excited, confident, and ready.
And as in previous years, you used the 3 days of La Panna to prepare for this. This time, no surprises, no crashes. It seems as if everything's right.
Yeah, unfortunately, I missed a couple of races in March. I got sick for a day or two, but I think it ended up working out better. I felt really fresh in Depana, and every day I felt stronger, and I feel great right now.
The difference with Lance coming back to Tour of Flanders after a long time is he won't have the knowledge you've got of this race, and it's very important in the Tour of Flanders to know exactly where the climbs are going to be.
Yeah, definitely. We have radios, and we're going to try to stay together as much as possible. And Lance commands, the most respect from the peloton, so that's a big factor in this race.
But this is going to be George Hincapie's week. Flanders, Gent-Wevelgem, Paris-Roubaix. This is what you live for.
Yeah, I've worked really hard for this week, and I think I'm ready. Thanks, Paul.
Lance's first time back to the Tour of Flanders for a long time, and looks like the weather's turned out good for you.
Like Freddie always says, if the sun comes out, then we're really lucky. That's the mentality here, because it's very rare that the sun shines, but it's a beautiful day.
It's a beautiful day. George Hincapie seems to be in excellent form, and you've actually changed your program this year to come out and help George, who seems to have been a bit isolated at the end of some of the one-day classics.
Well, I hope I can help. I can't make any promises because it's, the Tour of Flanders is arguably the hardest race of the year for one day, and so I don't know that I'm good enough right now. But George has always been close, and I think he stands a big chance. And in my mind, actually, he's the number one favorite for today.
What would the scenario be if you and George were together at the end in a small group of 10 riders at the Mur de Grammont? Would you wait back for him, or would you maybe try and solo for yourself?
No. I have no personal ambitions today. I'll stay with George all day.
Good luck.
Thanks.
Lance, please. Frank is just over there. Lance, please. Fred, great start to the season with second place in Milan-San Remo, and here the possibility of taking the lead in the World Cup competition.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. I think there's a good chance. I think Flying Car is one of probably my biggest rivals for that. Johan's riding really strong, so I think as a whole team we have a strong team, and to make it a lot easier for me to be up there. Thank you.
Well, Stefan, here at the Tour of Flanders, these are the kind of races that over the past couple of years we've seen you very close to the win. How's the form today?
I think it's nearly the same like the last 2 years, and we see in the race, you know, it's a lot of tactics, and you needed a lot of luck to be in the front. So the last week it's very comfortable for me in Belgium, and today it's special, but I hope in the final. I'm in the final.
Have you been to see the new Koppenberg to see what it's like?
Yeah, we've been there 2 days ago for visitors, the climb, and I think it's not so especially it's hard, and but everybody is concentrated on this, and I think the attack for a finish is on the different place, and it's east wind, so I think after the Koppenberg a lot of riders come back, and from the Muir and from Bosberg it's wind in the head. I don't know, 2 years ago was the same wind, and I was 40 on the finish. I don't know what's happened today. Thank you.
Mario, this year has been a start to the season for you like a real dream. It's the dream of a complete career. To win Milan-San Remo, it's something very special for me. It's something to do with life, and I'm so proud, and I just feel that I can't do better. And now to come to the start of the Tour of Flanders with the leader of the World Cup jersey, it's very special for me. Cycling is in the heart of people here in Belgium. We see so many people here coming to this race, and 9:30 in the morning at the start of a race, it's amazing to see so many people. Everybody really wants to come and race in Belgium. And I hope that I'm as competitive today, and I hope I can ride a good result today for myself and for the team. The time, the weather here is absolutely fantastic. It's good for us, for the Italians, because we don't like too much to race in the rain and the cold weather. We'll see what happens, and I'll do what I can.
So the riders called up to the start line. Paul Sherwin still in amongst it down there at the moment. Final preparations now. They face up to this long journey out to the coast first of all. I think it's the children there counting down in Flemish to the off. So the race that stops all of Belgium for a day, 264 kilometers, that's 164 miles. The riders have in fact a 15-minute neutralized rollout before the flag goes down on the Ostender Road, and then they head out towards the coast, making the way what is going to be, I think, a very difficult day of cycling. There's Cipollini in no hurry to find his way through the field. It is a big field, 25 teams as well. As I can say now, Paul Sherwin has hot-footed it up to the commentary box as we now look at shaping of the race. Now what has happened here, soon after the start this morning, 4 riders got away. They came together as a group of 4 at 34 kilometers, Paul. Alexi Rodriguez of the Kelme team, Ronnie Schultz of Gerolsteiner, Jan Kijks. There's the gap for you. It is still growing, by the way, up to 19 minutes on the peloton. It was 16 not long ago. Jan Kijks is in Vlaanderen 2002. Erwin Thijs, probably the best known of this group, although he's 31 now, rides for Palmans at the moment. There are 2 riders in between. We're yet to nail them down completely. One is certainly Rafael Diaz Justo of the Once, and the other one is a rider from the Benesto team, but we'll catch up with that very shortly. So it is a breakaway that I suppose, Paul, we expected, but they've given it a long lead here.
It's a huge advantage at this stage, but if you look at the style of these riders, you can tell they're starting to weaken. And the way the wind is blowing today, the wind will be on the riders' faces once we get into the hilly section of the course, and it will be very difficult for these guys to survive, because when we do come to the strategic climbs, the main field will absolutely accelerate, especially when we get closer to the climbs like the Old Quaremont. These guys have built up a big advantage, yes, but I think they're going to get pulled in before we get down to the finish line in Merbeek, and we will have a normal race at the Tour of Flanders.
As we now search out the main peloton here at Wanegem, 134 kilometers still to go, and the first climb of the Molenberg comes with 113 kilometers left to ride. Then there's 16 climbs and it becomes a real race, and what a fabulous race this has developed. Like all of cycle racing around the world in these major events, it seemed to have grown and grown. The crowd's bigger than ever as the Tour of Flanders, now in its 86th edition. It attracts all of Belgium, stops the show for the whole day. Yesterday there were some 15,000 cyclists rode the course, exactly the same course that the riders are riding today. Tourist cyclists who enjoyed tackling the climbs, many of them American too. We met them this morning, very proud of themselves, as well they might be, having gone round the same course as the riders, but they shouldn't compare their times, that's for sure. Into Wanegem now, a little stretch of cobblestones to the main peloton. Nobody there, Paul, really pushing this. They're just doing tempo at the front. We've heard nothing from Radio Tour to give us any indication that riders of importance have gone out, because so often the bad news is the crashes out on the coast in the crosswinds, but we haven't heard a thing today, which is good. I may have spoken too soon though, because there's a faller there on the left straight away, and that doesn't look very comfortable at all. It's a Gerolsteiner rider who's gone down.
Tell you one thing, when you go down on those cobblestones, they really are very hard, and this man looks as if he's got a real serious problem with his wrist there. The spectators are in at the side of the road. In fact, I think that's Olaf Polak who's gone down there. He was a very good individual time trial. There's a bit of panic there too, but the speed of the race, if he isn't too badly injured, and he still is holding his arm in a rather strange position there, if he can get himself back up to the main field, he could recover. But this is how it happened, and it's very often, Phil, the most dangerous, in fact, when the race is not going full on, because riders tend to be just a little bit too relaxed, and that's exactly what's happened down there, and he certainly does look as if he's injured that wrist quite badly.
Martin Elmiger from the Phonak team, the Swiss champion there, was the rider delayed. He's gone off. Yes, it looks as though he either twisted his wrist. I hope he's done no more than just that. It's painful on those cobblestones, Paul.
It certainly is. They are very hard indeed. These riders now going through this cobblestone section at Wanegem. The main field are around about 30 kilometers before they get to the first climb of the Molenberg. And as they do get closer to those climbs, they will start to accelerate, and we'll see this whole main field stretch out into one long line. Looks like Freddie Rodriguez there riding in about third or fourth position. The American champion is second overall in the World Cup competition, and I think this year looking to put himself up with a fine performance. US Postal are riding very close to the front, and it is interesting to talk to Lance Armstrong. He said here that he's absolutely dedicated to try and get George Hincapie a win for the first time in a World Cup race. He had a great win last year in Gont-Wevelgem, but this year he's hoping that he can win either the Tour of Flanders or Paris-Roubaix, and he's based the whole of his early season on making sure he's on form. And this year he's had no bad luck at all, as in previous years. A couple of years ago he crashed in the 3 days of Le Panne and cracked a rib, but right now I think George is probably on the best condition he's ever had in his career.
The average speed just under 40 kilometers an hour. The two riders who were chasing now are absorbed by the peloton, De Justo and Odriozola. So there's only the four leaders, but it's an awful lot of work to bring back 19 3/4 minutes. I'm sure of that. Little view at the back here, not surprisingly, a little Colombian rider on the right there for Kelme is not enjoying the cobblestones.
It's always very important to ride in the first 15-20 places, and you can see right now a little more urgency at the front end of the main field as there's another crash at the back. That's why you have to ride at the front.
And one or two taking the chance to get off here while they queue round what looks like a big shunt here of riders. Nobody's getting through. Let's hope they're all okay. We'll get through with the cameras as well, I suspect. And Palman's here now trying to cool the peloton off, because they've got a man in that breakaway in Erwin Thijs. And so they've got control of the peloton again, slowing it down, backing it off. As a result, the field has got back on at the back. Looks as though we've got certainly one US Postal up there, and they're all up. The men that matter are here. George Hincapie and Lance Armstrong right at the front, checking on the situation behind, both looking very good at the moment.
Well, they obviously realise and know just exactly what to do there. On the left-hand side, you can just see Eric Zabel as well. He's very much in control of Team Telecom here, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Zabel putting in a good performance here. They've got a very good two-pronged attack as well, with Stefan Weissermann, the kind of rider who really adores coming up here to Belgium to ride these races in the northern climes at the early part of the season. A tough bike rider who excelled in the Peace Race, the race that used to be the biggest amateur race in the world, but now very much an integral part of Team Telecom's one-day classics riders.
Yeah, it's a good team for this race, Telecom today, and a puncture here at the back of the field. This is Tom Steele's, and that is a shame, because Tom is having, now that's the problem when you've had a crash, the cars aren't there.
That's the big problem when the field gets split up like that. You can stand at the side of the road for a minute or a minute and a half waiting for your team car to come forward. It's interesting to know that none of the other riders on the Map A squad were to give their wheel to Tom Steele, so obviously he's not one of the team leaders today. I think the responsibility for this race today is probably going to lie on the shoulders of Robbie Hunter, the South African, who is in excellent form, and of course Stefano Zanini as well.
Yeah, they're definitely the two men for Map A today. Over the Schelde, which is the big river that courses through Belgium and on into Germany. And still a very big commercial river here, because barge traffic is very popular for transport in Europe. And the peloton really have reformed here, except poor old Tom Steele's. And I really would like to see him come back after his illness, mononucleosis, and have a very good race. But there we are, left by the roadside, and I don't think he can possibly rejoin now. These boys are getting themselves into a nice fast tempo. Back up to the four leaders now. Here they are. There they are listed for you. Rodriguez, Schultz, Keitz and Thijs at 122 kilometers from the finish for them. This is now meaning that we are not very far away from the climb of the Molenberg. It comes at 113 to go.
Well, these guys will get their first taste of the uphill. This is another long section of cobblestones at Lippenhovenstraat, 1.3 kilometers. You can see by the style of these guys, this is Erwin Thijs at the back. You see, it is very difficult right now for these guys. They are starting to feel the pain of the breakaway situation they've been in. They've put a lot of energy into building up that 19.5 minutes advantage. But I think when the main field starts to approach climbs like the Old Quaremont at 45 to 50 kilometers an hour, you'll see that little figure at the top of the screen there start to plummet quite rapidly.
Well, Erwin Thijs, 3 small wins, all in Belgium in the Kermesse races last year. They're the races that are around about 120, 150 kilometres around the towns here, and he managed to pick out 3 of those to win. But he's not a big winner anymore, and as I say, he's 31 years of age now. But he's obviously decided to go out early today to grab a little bit of television time. Although he's not contributing much to this breakaway anymore, and they've been out front now for just on 90 kilometres.
The man doing most of the work on the front there is the Kelme rider Alexis Rodriguez Hernandez. Kelme really are quite a remarkable team. We expect to see them riding well in races like the Giro d'Italia, Tour de France and Vuelta a España, but their riders will always have a go in a race. They will always try and get themselves into a breakaway situation. In years gone by, it was very rare to see the Spanish coming up to take part in these races, but over the last few years the sport has become so much more international that the Spanish teams come up here to the races in Belgium and the north of France, and they are competitive.
Yes, and it's good to see as well, because the Italians didn't like to travel either, but they are now having a very, very good start to the season indeed. As the Flandrian flags wave on, and they've got plenty to wave at in this breakaway, with Erwin Thijs and teammate, well, ex-teammate in fact, Jan Keitz from Flanders in 2002. The gap, despite all, has only been dropped by about 20 seconds at the moment. So they're surviving well, but when the legs go, it'll probably go rather badly. Now, what's this? This is another crash here, is it? Oh, it's a puncture to Cipollini. This is a replay they've just brought in. So this has happened moments ago. And a flat wheel for Mario Cipollini. He's not having much of a day, Paul.
Definitely not having very much luck at all, but his teammates were all around him there. He's obviously in fine form at the start of this season. Cipollini having a much better start to the year, I think, than he's had in recent years, and that's why he managed to come up with that very good win in Milan-San Remo. This here, the Padestar, another crash here, and I think this was at the back end of the main field, and that's the chaos in the cars The cars do an absolutely incredible job of avoiding riders. Let's just see if we can see how that happened there. The Kelme rider, he probably caught that little line down the middle of the road. Now, the riders call that Death Valley because these roads are made of concrete and they're stuck together in the middle. Another puncture here for Tom Steels. This really is quite remarkable. This is turning out to be quite a dramatic day for Tom. He's got a teammate there, in fact, who stopped at the side of the road with him as well.
Well, I'm just wondering if Tom swapped wheels with him or whether he got away first, but he's gone. Now Steels is back in the action, and we think it was a wheel swap with Robbie Hunter there.
It looked very much like it might have been, Robbie. This is total chaos here right now. There are bike riders all over the place. Well, there, in fact, is Tom Steels getting himself back into the race, and that big, strong figure, the other Mapei rider, it could well have been Robbie Hunter trying to get himself back in. But there's no panic right now because you can see the main field is all over the road. They are not going very fast at all, probably 42, 43 kilometers an hour, but that will speed up quite dramatically once we go through the feeding station. Feeding station coming just before Klausbergen.
Now here's that wheel change again, which was fair enough by Tom as he puts the wheel in. There's, as you see, no team car. It arrives afterwards, and so although he's given the wheel to Robbie, Robbie's struggling to get it into his bike.
But you have to take that kind of a risk when you're in a situation like this because you don't know how far behind the team cars are going to be, especially having gone through one or two cobble sections like that. St. Martin Laartem right now, not too far away from Brakel. Brakel being the town which nearly every Belgian race in Flanders seems to go through, and it's the town where, in fact, Peter van Petegem comes from. So he'll be pretty much on home training ground right now. He'll know exactly where he is, and if I was a spectator there, I'd be a little bit careful of stepping back because these guys, they use the cycle paths very often to try and move up the main field because, as you can see, the field is all over the road there, and the cycle paths here in Belgium are a very good opportunity to move forward, but they can be very dangerous. I remember a situation in the Tour de France a few years ago when I was racing when Marcel Tinazzi was moving up the outside of the spectators, moving in fact forward Sean Kelly. A spectator moved backwards, he hit him and he broke the scaphoid bone in his wrist there, but he actually managed to carry on and finish the Tour de France, but he was in severe pain for many days.
A huge risk. When you're on normal cycling here in Belgium, by the way, you have to ride on the cycle path. You're not allowed to ride on the highway, which makes sense, I guess. But you've got to find out sometimes where they've actually disappeared to, because they're not always plainly marked, and sometimes they've popped up on the opposite side of the road, so you have to change sides of the road to ride the cycle path. 1911, well, it's slowly eroding, but slowly is the word just now at 120 kilometers to go. 7 kilometers now from the Molenberg. Lotto driving well at the front with no obvious winner on their team because Andre Schmil also out, which is rather sad for him today, having hoped to retire by Paris-Roubaix with a classic victory in his favoured Belgian nationality now. And in fact, he's learning to speak Flemish, although he lives in Italy currently. Now he's a naturalised Belgian. He has promised he will return to make his final home in Belgium. And I think as a result of the accidents which have kept him out, but back to the leaders as we approach the Molenberg, I think Andre Schmil will ride his season out now, and who knows, he might be the world champion by the end of the year. There's the Molenberg, the first of the 16 climbs now. 9.8% is the gradient. That's 1 in 10. And it is going to be, is it going to be goodbye here to Alexis Rodriguez? He's struggling a little bit as he hits the cobblestones.
Amazing to see the cobblestones like this, because the month of April normally in Belgium is all about what this race is. It's normally very wet, normally very windy. Today the conditions are absolutely perfect, and see how quickly that time gap has come down.
Yep.
We've actually gone inside the 17 minutes right now. Rodriguez not very much at home, but he'll be able to recover over the top of this climb. And the crowds here, I think, are probably the biggest I've seen at the Ronde van Vlaanderen. And almost certainly many of these people will rush away from here and try and see the race in a different spot. Many of these people actually bringing portable TVs to the race to continue watching the race live over the 4 hours of coverage which is put on for what is the biggest bike race and one of the biggest sporting events that Belgium has to offer.
So over the top of the Molenberg, first introduced into Flanders in 1983, and this will be the 18th time they've gone over the top there. And no damage done to the brake, but the gap has come down significantly now and is tumbling rather quickly. But they'll try and reorganize themselves now as they square up for the Wolverberg in the next climb to come. And Then after that, they're going to be meeting them approximately every 8 or 9 kilometres. Now Liepenhovenstraat for the peloton, and they are driving now at the front, and Lotto are doing a lot of the damage here. Oh, that man just got through under the sides there with 1 foot out of the pedal, and a good job he missed that ditch there, Paul. It would have been a long way out.
Well, this is the chaos at the back end of the main field. This is why a lot of riders are moving forward right now. There's Paolo Bettini as well, the Mapei rider. He's riding a great race here. It's amazing character, Bettini, because not only do we see him capable to be competitive in the hilly races like Liège-Bastogne-Liège, but he's also, for a small rider, pretty good on the cobblestones, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him going out on an attack once we get to the latter part of this race over some of the climbs like Ten Bosch or the Mur de Grammont. No longer in the shadow of Michele Bartoli, who's moved away from Mapei. I think Bartoli a lot happier now because he feels that with the Faso Bortolo team he is a lone leader, and he has the complete support of the team when it comes to the races that he wants to win.
Looking at the Lotto boys here, I better correct what I said about Schmill, of course. I completely forgot about Peter van Petegem, who is my favourite to win the race. But it's funny how the mind goes blank sometimes. I was thinking of the old American Mercury team, which Van Petegem was obliged to leave mid-term and come back to Lotto. He is really riding well and clearly feeling good, because he sent the team to the front here to ride and try and reduce the size of this peloton.
It's a long section of cobblestones here. These guys really are starting to pick up the pacemaking right now, and I can't wait for us to get through to the big climbs of the Knokteberg, Olde Quaremont and the Patersberg, because this field, which is still almost complete with the same number of riders who they had on the start, I think will literally explode when we get the speed and the repetition of all the big cobble climbs that we're coming to quite shortly.
16 minutes 18 seconds now. Soon to be inside for sure. Heading towards the Wolvenberg, one of the newest climbs in the Tour de Flanders. Hasn't been used before 1999, and this will only be the 3rd time, or the 4th time rather, over the top this time.
It's a long section of cobbles, this, Phil. The Paderstraat is a very famous section of cobblestones, and that's why you see these guys from Lotto have come forward to really put the hammer down. Van Petegem just a little bit further back. There is Ludo Dirksens as well in 3rd position there in the Lamprey jersey, the pink and blue jersey. He's a man who would really like to try and get himself a victory here, and I wonder if we will see a repetition of last year when Lamprey had their 2 strong riders in that leading group at the end, Ludo Dirksens and Maximilian Chiandri, the British-Italian rider on the squad. Chiandri's looked quite relaxed over the last couple of days, and I think he's looking forward to the last couple of years as a professional cyclist, and who knows, he may well come up with a big victory that I've always felt that he was going to get one day or another.
Some fine riding here. Not too sure who this rider is. It could be Thierry Marichal driving at the front for Lotto. But whatever it is, he's doing a jolly good pacemaking job, and he's got that line strung right out now, and we've got a problem here. These are the riders now at the back of the race, and you can see how they are being dispatched from the rear of the group, one after another. This is Jörg Ludwig, the German rider on Seiko, who usually has good early season form. He rode pretty well again in the Tour Down Under. And they're saying it's Nico Eekhout. Oh no, has given up, is what that means, opgegeven. So Eekhout has dropped back and dropped out. We saw him earlier.
Well, I was surprised to see him actually get back into the race, Phil, but because it was the Tour of Flanders, he obviously pushed himself through an awful lot of pain to get back into the main field. But I think that bang was just a little bit too much to carry on, especially in a race as difficult as this. You see how that acceleration has caused a lot of riders to start to string off the back here. The pressure is now starting to come on in the Tour of Flanders for the first time since they left Bruges this morning, and the speed will pick up as we get, and this I think is at the back of the race. This is the problem with Nico Eekhout. It was because of that crash a little bit earlier on. He was going back towards the team car, maybe to let the team manager know that he just couldn't keep hold of the handlebars and he was going to have to pull out. A pity really, because this man had excellent form after the recent 3 days of La Panne. He showed us that there, and that will be a serious problem I think later on for the Lotto squad, because they're losing one of their very strong riders who should have been in there with a chance to help Peter van Petegem.
Yes, they're losing a couple of good names, especially with Schmill also out for the moment, and Van Petegem losing a valuable pacemaker too. Now as we look down from the helicopter, well, we can't follow it by hot air balloon. We simply wouldn't keep up, because this race is going very quickly today in perfect conditions. The wind is helpful at the moment, but they will swing around and it will become unhelpful towards the end. Roborst now, and these look like the 2 chasers, Paul, and Well, we haven't got an exact time check on them, but there's plenty of cars in the gap, so they still have a healthy... No, they haven't. In fact, those cars have got themselves in a rather embarrassing situation.
Well, that's not a very good call by the judges there. I don't think the referees, who normally keep the gap between the different groups as clear as possible, but what's happened here is the main field has accelerated so dramatically that they've pulled back 4 or 5 minutes on those two riders in no time at all.
Drinks all round, at least amongst the Lotto boys. Hold on tight over that railroad crossing, because that's the easiest way to lose your drinking bottle. And their job is plain now. They've got to keep this pressure on for as long as they physically can. I don't think they're counting on finishing this year's Tour de Flanders, but they will be there in time to see, they hope, Peter van Petegem sprint to victory. Well, we'll see. We're still a little way away from that. These are the two leaders now. Somehow they got rid of those cars in as quick as that. I don't know where they've gone, but these two have been picked up. Jon Odriozola from iBenesto.com and Rafael Diaz Justo from the Once team. Back in the pack.
I've got to take away what I just said about those judges, because they cleared that out. I didn't think there was any possibility of getting those cars out of that gap at all, and it happened in almost 1 kilometre. So well done the judges there to get that sorted out. The race is being kept and controlled by radio. All of the team referees are in contact all of the time. They're completely in communication, and that's how they manage to keep the race as clean and as safe as possible out on the course. There is Stefano Zanini in about 5th place there, looking very comfortable indeed. Very strong, this man. He won the opening stage of the 3 days of La Panna, but he really couldn't do anything in that final individual time trial against Peter van Petegem. There is Johan Museo in the light blue jersey as well. So all of the big names now, Phil, starting to move forward. And look at this. Ludo Dirksen, come on, boys, let's have a good go. 5 kilometres now for them to the Molenberg.
You remember last year, Paul, he just attacked every time the row went up, and it looks as though he's about to do the same again. He's lining up for the Molenberg with 15.5 minutes to make on the 4 leaders, and Dirksen again cannot be controlled. He is a tremendously strong man. He's not the most clever tactical rider, but my goodness me, on his day he's strong.
But that's what makes it much more dramatic to watch a bike race like this. Ludo Dirksen doesn't use an awful lot of tactics. He just pounds away at the race. He just wants to dynamite the race, blow it to pieces, and he goes out and attacks on every one of the climbs. And I think he's got great condition again today. And let's just see how he reacts when we get to the big climbs in a short while. But it is important right now to go round that corner in about 4 kilometres time in the first 10 positions or so, because as we saw earlier with the leading group of 4, the Molenberg is very narrow indeed, and that rider there from Rabobank is trying to steal a slight advantage over the group.
He's hooked up to the back of our motorbike at least for a second before we get out of the way. He's one of the younger members of the Rabobank team, this. It could well be Karsten Kroon having a little go. I don't think it's Matt Heyman, the Aussie, and in fact it is Karsten Kroon who's gone clear.
A clever move this. He's going to try and get himself 50 or 100 metres advantage, so he'll go around the corner there into the Molenberg in first place. But you know, the speed of the main field right now, it's very difficult to stay off the front, because we're picking up our average speed now in the group to around about 47, 48 kilometres an hour. As we look back there, they've given him a certain advantage for the moment, but they will speed up dramatically as we get closer to the Molenberg. The time gap, as you can see at the top there, is still coming down slowly but surely to 15.5 minutes. But when we get to the big climbs, that will come down in minutes at a time rather than just seconds.
I don't think they'll react to Karsten Kroon's attack. He was a long-time leader in the Giro d'Italia King of the Mountains competition. He's a good rider and deserved of some success, but he plays mostly the domestique for what is a highly successful Dutch team these days. But remember, they're without World Cup holder Eric Decker, sadly out, hopefully back for the Tour de France following his crash in Milan-San Remo. So the main field will have to rely on others, and not least, of course, in the upcoming big tours, they'll look for Levi Leipheimer, their new member from the US, to do them a good turn there. Inside 15.5 minutes now, and the peloton weighing up their chances as we head on to the mole. Oh, there's been another crash at the back here, and that one has taken out 1 or 2 good riders as well, because looking down there's one of the Aqua Saponi riders who's gone down, and this should be the Russian champion, I think, Paul, who's crashed. And if it is the Russian champion for Aqua Saponi, it'll be I think it's Martin de Gank, is it, who's gone down?
This is Thierry Maréchal as well. Let's just see how that happened. You see what's happening. A couple of riders are trying to move forward here. It is always very difficult, especially when you're switching across the road there, and 4 or 5 riders have gone down. Thierry Maréchal is the rider standing up there in the red, but there's also an SC Tiscali rider gone down as well, but this is not looking very good at all. The race doctor is right in there at the moment, and I have a feeling that this young man will not be back in the Tour of Flanders today, but almost certainly he'll be taking a lift to the hospital, which is not too far away from the road.
Well, let's hope that he's not too badly hurt either. I think Max van Heeswijk was the Domo rider who was on the floor. But either way, they're not going to get back to this group because they've now started to turn the screw that little bit tighter.
One or two riders trying to get themselves. In fact, you can see there that the Rabobank rider who leapt off the front there, he's been brought back into the fold. Carsten Kroon tried to get himself an advantage, but that's not going to happen. Now look at this, the big organisation of the pink telecom train moving forward right now. They want to make sure that their men, Erik Zabel and Stefan Weserman, get around that corner very smartly indeed. Everybody fighting to stay in that arrowhead at the front end of the main field, but you can see the pressure now starting to come in as we get that big long line of riders tailing out at the back of the peloton. Very shortly, now this is a very dangerous moment here because the Molenberg, you come charging down this big wide road and you turn right into a very narrow little street, and that's where very often in the past we've seen corners, we've seen crashes in that corner, and let's hope that that's not going to happen today. But that's why all of the big leaders now are starting to move forward.
Well, a lot of riders still trying to come back from that delay, and I think most of them are getting back except the fallers. That last line is just about to close the door, but it's going to take a big effort by that one rider to shut it down, but he's done it now as they all come back together. You can see the speed over the ground of the peloton. They are moving now very quickly as we approach the 15-minute gap. So they've taken 4 minutes off those breakaways since the first climb of the Molenberg, as the leaders themselves are heading out to the Wolverberg.
This is almost like a bunch sprint right now. That corner is so important at this stage of the game. It is really as if you do have to sprint for it, and there we are turning a right here. It's not too far away from the Molenberg right now, about 1.5 kilometers, but the pressure is absolutely amazing at the front end of that main field. I just saw a few moments ago it was almost completely organized, and then there was a big group of riders came up from the left-hand side and swamped the men on the front, so they've got to fight their way forward once again. But the pressure now and the speed is very much up as we go through St. Maria Horbeck. That's around about 1.5 kilometers from the right-hand bend, and still lots of pink jerseys on the front. Also moving forward, looking after Peter van Petegem, is in around about 5th or 6th position. The Lotto riders are doing an absolutely superb job right now. There's Jackie Durand on the right-hand side for the Française des Jeux. He knows the Tour of Flanders. He's won it before, but not from the main field, that was for sure. That was a very long breakaway situation that survived and caused one of the big surprises of the Tour of Flanders. But maybe not so, because Jackie Durand has also come up with some big wins like Paris-Roubaix as well.
So the peloton arriving at the Molenberg, where we've just been with the leaders. But that was some 15 minutes ago since they went over the top. While the leaders head out towards the Wolverberg. Now let's see how the peloton reacts here. They've certainly worked hard to hold the position at the front. Lotto have done well, so too have Telecom. But now look at the queue at the back of the peloton as the leaders already out of the saddle making the climb. This is when it really hurts now. And this is Peter van Petegem now, one of the hot favourites for Belgium. This is what he wanted, Paul. This is why he's used his team. Now he's got a clear sight of the climbs. They've done a good job for him. Meanwhile, at the back, it's all sorts of chaos. And very often those boys will no longer see the peloton at the front now.
Look at this, Zabel in 3rd place. He's looking pretty good as well. But Van Petegem had the team do exactly what they wanted. Van Petegem is not going to win the Tour of Flanders with this climb today, but almost certainly he's going to make sure that he doesn't lose it, because one or two of those riders, as you said, Phil, will probably not see the front end of the main field again. This is a brilliant piece of riding as well by Team Telecom to move Erik Zabel up there. Zabel, I think, surprised everybody last year in this bike race by getting himself up there towards the finish, and he's the kind of rider who, if he can get himself into a group of 5 or 10, could be a winner here of the Ronde van Vlaanderen today. There's the time gap. You can see at 105 kilometers to go, that's around about 2.5 hours of racing. The time is coming down very dramatically now. In another 8 kilometers time, these guys will be hitting the Wolfenberg. But before they go there, they've got a nice little stretch of cobblestones at Volkerhem.
Well, I think that was Ralph Grabsch of Telecom who's got to the front. Here's the boys who had to queue, just about to get on at the back again. Just looking down the bunch there to see if there's anybody jumping out of this. Back with the leaders now on the climb of the Wolverberg. Another big crowd here. The thing about the Tour of Flanders, if you know the roads here well, you can zigzag around and watch the riders in a number of places. So only the 4th time on this climb. A little bit of picture breakup. They're live pictures. 105 kilometers to go. They look to be climbing this with a little bit more sense, I think, as they make their way up towards the summit. Just a reminder of the names: Alexis Rodriguez, Ronnie Schultz, Jan Kijks, and Erwin Thijs of the Palmans team. He's sat at the back here. It's the Kelme rider is Rodriguez, Flandrian is Kijks, and Schultz rides for Gerolsteiner, rider in the white up there.
Well, the energy's going out of these guys pedaling action, because they now know where they are in this bike race. They know that they're about to start the very repetitive nature of all these small cobbled climbs. They know that the main field will be accelerating. They know just exactly how the race is going to unfold. They've finished the 2nd climb of the day, and that leaves 14 climbs left here in the Tour of Flanders. And these riders very shortly will go through the feeding station, the 2nd feeding station of the day. And then very soon after that, they will hit the Mont de l'Encluc, the Knokteberg, and then the Old Quaremont. The Old Quaremont is the next point, I think, where the main field will really start to put the hammer down, because habitually the race splits up there with groups of 15 or 20 getting clear, and then it's a scramble to try and recover and get back into the front of the main race before we go to the Patersburg. And then this year we're going to have the Koppenberg coming back into the race for the first time in about 15 years.
So after the leads have gone over Wolvenberg, the gap comes down to just on 14 minutes. There's the average speed, 39 kilometers an hour. Very quick tempo indeed today for the Tour de Flanders, in perfect conditions for a bike race. It's not warm, but it is sunny, and I'm sure the riders are quite warm at the moment. But as always, we've seen a lot of crashes back in that main field. Only the strong men are surviving at the head of the peloton, poised for the big jumps which will come on the climbs. We are at the moment for the peloton 4 hills away from the Old Quaremont. We haven't seen that in the Tour de Flanders for 15 years. As we're watching now, Eric Zabel here, and Hoffman just off the front. Zabel's gone out for the ride, I think. Tristan Hoffman, a very good rider to go with, very strong. Interesting move, Paul. I'm not sure why Eric has done this.
Obviously Hoffman was the man who attacked, and Zabel was at the front of the main field and decided this Hoffman is a big strong boy, I think I might go with him. They're looking for the possibility maybe of a split on the next climb, the Wolvenberg, and then they would have a nice group off the front of the main field. Last year Hoffman was 5th in the Tour of Flanders. 2 years ago he was 5th in the Tour of Flanders. He's a very good bike rider, and I think very much appreciated on the TSC Tiscali team. He's now looking over his shoulders, and they can see the front end of the main field not too far behind them.
Well, the way this race is going today, you know, you could find that strong riders come up rather than these two go back. This is how it happened. Hoffman was the man who put in the surge. He loves the Tour de Flanders. Apart from the 5th Paul's mentioned, he's also had a 7th place. So he knows this race very well. He knows how much he enjoys riding it. He had a marvellous season in the year 2000. He was a real challenger in the World Cup race. And so he's gone clear. And Zabel opted to go after him. Now that what they'll hope for is that a group does join them. They won't be anticipating 102 kilometres, certainly not on the roads that lay ahead today, because we're looking at still 2 or 3 hours in the saddle, a little over 3 hours to go. 14 minutes now precisely.
Zabel looks very good here right now. These guys, I think, are quite surprised to have got themselves a 200-meter gap that quickly. Zabel not doing too much work right now. I think he was quite happy to cover the move, but as you say, I don't think he's looking forward to riding a long breakaway of 102 kilometers. They'll try and stay clear now to the Wolvenberg and hope maybe that over the next section of cobblestones at Volkerhem, followed by that climb, that there's a split at the front end of the main field, and we may well see 20 or 30 riders going clear. But Zabel, I think, in excellent form this year. A brilliant bike rider, this man. You really have to appreciate him, because he's one of the rare bike riders in this day and age who, like Laurent Jalabert or like Sean Kelly in the past, is competitive from the very first bike race of the year right the way through until the very last one.
Yeah, he's deservedly the #1 bike rider, because that's exactly what he is right now, Eric Zabel. He's never afraid to make an effort, and you know, his sprinting this year has been good but not great. So I'm wondering if the twitch fibers are perhaps finally on the wane, but he's been right up there in the action since day 1 of the season. Now he's looking over to see if anybody's coming out to play today, because he would certainly like it. We still appear to have Karsten Kroon up there, although this time now I think he's on these two, because Kroon, I think, came back into the group as we were climbing over the Molenberg.
Well, this is pretty interesting. In fact, our motorbike has stopped here to see how far behind the main field are. And they obviously have let those two riders go off the front of the main field, because you can see by the way the main field is riding there's absolutely and utterly no reaction at all. And that is quite good for Erik Zabel, because they will now be able to build up an advantage of a minute or so over the main field. But immediately we say that there's an attack coming again from the Rabobank riders. They're obviously today trying to find Kroon again, who's decided he too wants to look for that breakaway situation.
Well, it proved one point, Paul. He was back in the pack, because he's out of it again now, trying to get on terms. Much better chance now if he can get across to Erik Zabel, because Kroon is a very strong rider, and 3 of them up there could alter the face of this race if they start working together. And there's no notice yet that Zabel is actually helping Hoffman. I think Erik wants to see whether this is going to be worth trying for or not. But if they do get away once the hills start, and then the main pack... Oh, what's happened here on the corner? This is another fall here. I didn't catch his number, but one of the telecom riders has gone down, and that's rather a nasty shunt. But it looked to me as though it was possibly Andreas Klyer. I don't think. Here it is again. It wasn't one of the top telecom riders. In fact, it was Ralf Grabsch who went down, they're saying. Yes, it is indeed. Ralf Grabsch, 102. Well, that's bad luck.
Again, it just makes you realize how important it is to ride at the front end of this main field. The front end right now is controlled by the light blue jerseys of US Postal Service. This is Antonio Cruz on the front of these cobblestones. Kasseien, by the way, there, 3,000 meters is the Flemish word for cobblestones. There's Danilo Hondo there in 4th position. George Hincapie there is in 3rd. Very confident riding at the front end of the main field. I think the whole of the team here feel that Hincapie's got a great chance of winning this race today, and if not, he's got a good crack at winning Paris-Roubaix in a week's time. There is Ludo Dirksens as well, riding pretty close to the front. He's very much at home on this kind of situation. He really does like to ride on the cobblestones, and he really adores this race. There's Kroon. He very soon will be back in the fold, but he has tried to get himself off the front and chase that breakaway with Erik Zabel.
Yes, he's going to be caught, and it's interesting that in fact Postal have decided that Zabel is a danger, and they've started to work and chase him down as we go inside 100 kilometers from the finish. Now, I must confess, one of the new riders on US Postal, Tom Boonen, I think that's him on the front at the moment, but he's becoming already a recognised star in the team. They really respect what they see as a great new talent in cycling, and they've put him on this team, and that's him now riding on the front, the big tall man. Well, how about that for confidence, Paul, in your first Tour of Flanders?
21 years of age, almost certainly he must feel very excited. Not only is he a Belgian riding the Tour of Flanders, but he's riding on a team here who's got a very good chance of taking out the victory. He knows that George Hincapie is in good form, and it's always good for the youngsters on the team to be able to ride alongside Lance Armstrong. There is Chippo, and there's another incident at the back there. A few more riders have gone down. No. It really is now starting to hot up at the rear end of the main field. A lot of riders suffering here.
They certainly are. And right in the distance, I thought I saw somebody standing by the roadside. So these boys have been caught out yet again. This is Kurt van Lendegem of the Landbouw Credit Team, one of the small second division teams, now saying goodbye to the main field in the Tour de Flanders today, as they continue to get slung off the back over the cobblestones. When pedal as fast as they can, they just simply can't hold the wheel in front. And it's a young Belgian rider riding for US Postal, Tom Boonen, who's causing the damage here, and he's driving tremendously well. Look, he spotted his mates on the roadside. He's just had a little wave there. Well, he really is confident. He's done what he wanted to do. He's been seen at the front by his fans.
Quite good to have a Belgian on the team, because you see that little sign there. He indicated that the pavement was coming up, and he indicated that to Lance Armstrong, and he was telling Armstrong, we got a chance here to ride on the comfortable side of the road. Now there are the two men who took off a few moments ago, Tristan Hoffmann and Erik Zabel. But it really is good to see how strong this US Postal Service team is here, and you can see the chaos as everybody now is scrambling to get onto a smooth bit of road. That's Andrea Tafi on the right hand side there for Mappé. Not great form this year, probably in his last year as a professional cyclist. He had hoped to be on absolute form for these races, but I think Andrea gets very much more psyched up for next week's Paris-Roubaix race, where he hopes he'll be able to get himself a second win.
You see the way here as Zabel comes back into the pack now, and that's all down to the chase of US Postal. Lance Armstrong was initiating there the attack from the team, and again another crash here. These are dangerous roads right now as they dodge around, and delayed this time in the group is Floyd Landis. Now he has come into this race, in fact, because of the disqualification from the team, the sacking of Gianpaolo Mondini after he confessed before he came to US Postal to using the drug EPO, and they've simply said, well, you know the rules, we don't tolerate it, and you're fired. And so a phone call actually brought in Floyd Landis. An interesting tale this, Paul. He was out training when his mobile phone rang and he was told to come over to the Tour de Flanders. So he said to his training partners, I've got to turn around, guys, I'm going to Belgium. And that's exactly what he did.
Well, the days of the modern technology nowadays is really quite remarkable, and these guys are always in communication even when they're out on the bike. That looks very much like Ludo Dirksen's at the front there.
Yeah, it will
deciding to put the hammer down a little bit, make it quite difficult. Armstrong up there in about 4th or 5th place. Very happy to come back to the Tour of Flanders, and I don't think he's been here, Phil, since 1995, when he really was regarded very much as a one-day classics rider.
Yes.
But since then, everything has changed in his life. He's got over the cancer that he was struck by. He's won the Tour de France 3 times, but he's still, I think, in the back of his mind knows that he's capable of winning any one of these one-day races that he wants to.
Well, he's a solid man. In fact, he's staying in our hotel, Paul, so we can get the best story off him when he finishes. But at breakfast this morning, he was very cool. He came down last to breakfast, never spoke to anybody. He was all psyched up for his day in Flanders, and we knew this would happen because he's this sort of rider. And Max Chandler, his teammate, is probably worrying what he might do next, because you never know with Ludo. There he goes, a stage winner in the Tour de France, former champion of Belgium, turned professional very late in life, and now we're heading towards a 14-minute time gap to the 4 leaders. But these boys know those 4 leaders will not survive the passage of the day.
Big strong boy there. He's opened up a massive advantage there over the Volkerhem cobblestones. Very shortly, in about 2 kilometers, he'll be coming up to the Wolvenberg. And he again, Phil, I don't think trying to ride himself alone to the finish. What he's trying to do right now is to open up an advantage and hope there's a split off the front end of the main field when we come to the next climb of the day. But then for around about 20 minutes, 25 minutes or so, we should have a little bit of a relaxation in the main field as the guys take on board their food at the second feeding station and get ready then for the biggest assault of all of the big climbs which will come. And I've always felt that the real start of the Tour of Flanders is at the Old Quaremont, because that climb, although itself not very steep, really breaks the field as they go over the top. This is Robbie Hunter on the front here right now. Very comfortable, I think, now that he's riding for Mappé. Yeah. A team that has given him the confidence, the team that actually has confidence in him as well. I think he felt when he rode for Lamprey that they never really supported him. He was treated as a foreigner on the team and never really given the chance to shine as he can. And he's proving this year that he's going to be a super talent, I think, for South Africa.
Yes, I asked him this morning if he was still talking to his teammates as he was standing next door to his ex-teammates Lamprey on the line today. He said yes, he chats to everybody, but he's very happy to be with Mappé. And he's driving, he's found himself in the right position here, I'm sure not by accident, as we now get on to the Wolvenberg for the peloton. The new team on the block that's riding extremely well is Phonak, strengthened over the winter, and now a team to be respected. They've come through the ranks of cycling. Now it's the top team in Switzerland.
And it also has an American link as well, because in fact Jim Okowitz is a consultant to the Phonak team and helps them set up all of their programs throughout the year. Jim, really good to see that he's been involved in the cycling and managed to keep himself involved in the international sport at the top level as well, because Jim, even today, is a super enthusiast, isn't he, Phil, when it comes down to these one-day races.
And to all of you listening, don't recommend you go cycling with him, because the man is so strong on a bike, but he wouldn't be any good on this climb. We'd get rid of him on the climb, I think, Paul.
That's the one thing that Jim doesn't like, is when the race goes uphill. But anyway, he certainly would be excited. He's actually out on the course today with some friends, getting in the atmosphere of the Ronde van Vlaanderen. And I spoke to him just before the start, and he was just as excited as when he was a team manager.
Well,
he's got a lot of confidence.
Paul, that yesterday he rode the last 100 kilometres of this course, which is the sector with all of the climbs in. So he had a very good day yesterday and provided us with a lot of useful information, I must confess. There we are, 95 kilometres from the finish. And we're just on the top now of the Wolvenberg for the main pack, which are now under the control of Antonio Cruz of US Postal. And the strong men are still here. We've seen Cipollini, we've seen Hincapie, Robbie Hunter, Lance Armstrong. I'd like to see more of Van Petegem and Museo, but I'm convinced they are still up here. This man is causing concern, as he will all the way to the finish, Ludo Dierksens. He's seen the top of the Wolverberg, now he's waiting for the peloton, and I'm sure he'll go again as soon as we get to the Kleisberg, which is also known as the Mont Le Clou.
I've got a feeling Robbie Hunter's not riding this race for a high finish in the overall standings. He looks as if he's been given the orders from the team to do a lot of work. They obviously got a lot of confidence in Stefano Zanini, who is the man on form. He led the 3 days of La Panna after winning the opening stage and only lost it in the final individual time trial. So it would seem as if Mappe's plan today is to look after men like Andrea, Tafi and Zanini, and Robbie Hunter, the young man coming into the team today, I think having to bend to team rules.
Well, that's often the way. Certainly poor old Tom Steele's having a rough ride. Don't know where he is in the course right now, because he's had a flat tyre and he's been involved in a delay as well. The gap now 13 minutes and counting. So we're coming back slowly to the 4 leaders. Nice little sharp descent here, but watch the bends on these steep little descents. These narrow roads of Flanders, where all of Belgian cycling was formed over 100 years ago now. The oldest classic is Liège, Bastogne-Liège, but remember that is in the French Ardennes, and we're now riding here in the Flemish Ardennes, a totally different country altogether, although it's the same country, Belgium, but one side speaks French and the other side speaks Flemish. Now we get a chance to see this breakaway rider here from Phonak, and it is Matthias Buxhofer. I nearly stuck my neck out and said it was. It's a typical move by Buxhofer, who's gone clear. 13.23, he's looking to close down. He'd like a little bit of help, but as has been the case these last few kilometres, those who attack don't get any help. They simply get swept up by the field.
They're about 10 kilometres to the second feed. Then after that, a further 10 kilometres, they've got the climb of the Klausberg, or the Mont de l'Enclou as it's called in French. And that's when these guys, you can see even the difference in the speed of the main field right now compared to the 4 leaders who we saw a few moments ago. They are riding around about 7 or 8 kilometres an hour faster than the men at the front of the bike race. They've led that bike race since 28 kilometres. The race was formed by a breakaway of 2 riders who were then chased by 2 riders, and they became a 4-man lead group 34 kilometres into the race. So they've been at the head of affairs for an awful long time now, and they were starting to be feeling the fatigue that creeps into your body, having used a huge gear over the flat part of the course, and they're not able anymore, Phil, to pick up the pace to the kind of speeds that you need to stay off the front. And I think the main field, just for a little moment now, are putting up the white flag, but not for too long, only another 15 kilometres or so, and we get to the very crucial repetitive nature of all of these climbs.
Here we go, feeding time at the zoo for the riders now. They've swept up Buxhofer as he goes back in the pack, but somebody again has put the hammer down just a fraction more as they start to string out once more. But the big teams all of the time, Paul, Rabobank, Mappe, US Postal, Domo, they are the ones that are doing the driving now at the head of this field, trying to get something going as we head up towards the Kleisberg, which is a nasty little climb. It'll be the steepest we've tackled of the 3 so far, and it's been in the Tour of Flanders, by the way, since 1955. It's one of the old favourites, this, and it's not too far away. When they get to it, we'll be having just 83 kilometres to go. So, as you can see, 9 kilometres from the climb.
Andrea Tafi looking very confident there too. It's all back together right now, but all of the time we keep forgetting that those 4 leaders are in front, and now by just 13 minutes. It's come down around about 6 minutes over the last 20 kilometres or so. And again, Carsten Kroon trying to get himself off the front. It's always very dangerous, this part of Europe as well, for racing, because there are a lot of these little directional islands and ornamental central reservations, which as the race splits up, if you're not paying attention, you can find yourself riding very smartly into one of those road signs, and I tell you what, they don't bend.
No, they don't. But fortunately, the riders at the moment are managing to miss out on all of the road furniture. All looking now at somebody else to have a go, but there's no shortage of riders wanting to attack. They sense the lull and off they go to see if they can start the move. As we're looking now at a little flurry of attacks off the front of the bunch. Again, the big teams represented, Telecom sending their man up in the second wave. Chance to catch up. Française de Jeu is here. They're riding on a high, the French team this year. Feeling very confident they'll get a wild card into the Tour de France. I'll be very surprised if they don't, because they've had a very good start to the season. They brought in the British rider Bradley Wiggins today because they've lost their Australian sprinter Baden Cook. He's taken ill. So Wiggins has got the call up, as you will have seen earlier, and it looks as though this little breakaway is going to be swept up in any case. As we go inside 13 minutes to the leaders, we're just on 58, 59 miles to the finish, 91 kilometers. A little bit of a drag here. They're keeping over to the right of the road on the smooth sector. Just a little stretch of cobblestones, only a couple of 100 meters for those that are unlucky enough to have to ride them.
Small climb here called the Edelar. And I tell you what, these little climbs are not even marked on the map as the climbs, the 16 climbs which are categorized. That's the amazing thing about race organizations. They advertise the fact that there are 16 climbs, but there are probably about 25 or 30 climbs which are just as difficult out on the course but don't get any recognition. You can see the urgency now, all of these riders moving forward all of the time, trying to get themselves into a situation where there is a split off the front end of the main field. We're getting closer and closer now to the feeding station, then after that we really get into the real nitty-gritty of the first big climb to the day. It is quite amazing. Once they've gone over the Klausbergen, the Knokteberg, Old Quaremont and Patersberg are within 10 kilometers of each other, so you've got to climb every 2 to 3 kilometers, and it really doesn't give you very much time to have a mechanical incident and recover and get back into the bike race.
Into the road junction there, Lerpegem. That was Ralph Huser of Team Coast who was setting the pace. Drop back a little bit now. Team Coast trying to re-establish themselves after a terrible season last year. The change of management there now with Juan Fernandez, the director sportif, and also the German rider, a German rider who's helping them out too, who has done very well indeed. But I think it's an organisation now that can go places, and it's nice to see Alex Zuller is also riding that little bit better.
It's good to see Zuller riding well towards the end of his career as well. I think he's now starting to enjoy his bike riding again, having got over all of that those problems with Festina. I think he's managed to put them all behind him, and then psychologically I think Alex Zuller has found a little bit more stability, and I think is enjoying the bike racing with Team Coast for probably his last couple of years as a professional. But going back here to the main field, you can see how much pressure there is on in this main field, Phil. There's a big long line at the front end. You can see people still trying to get off the front. This is Tafi again. Yeah. This man again, very much like Ludo Dirksen's, not a great tactician here as we come around the outside of Oudenaarde. But Tafi, like Ludo Dirksen's, just likes to hammer away at the front end of the main field. He attacks and attacks and attacks till people get fed up and let him go.
Well, 12:42 the gap as we roll on gently towards the major hills around.
As we look at the Kop van der Wegstrijd, the 4 leaders still holding on to around about 12 minutes advantage right now, and they're starting the climb here of the Klausberg. It's rated with 3 stars, it's 6%, and it plunges down on the other side, and they then ride around the back of the same hill and then come up to the Knokteberg. And this is now, you can see, looking at the pedaling action of these guys, Phil, they really are starting to pay for the efforts of having been off the front of this bike race from the 34th kilometre. This is where the main field will charge up here. It's a beautiful day for these Belgian spectators to come out here and really enjoy this bike race, which is one of their biggest sporting events of the year. And they really are enjoying this early season spring weather. It's been like this in Belgium for the last 15 days or so, which really is quite remarkable. In the past, we've seen so many times when the Tour of Flanders, in fact, it's outgo the lights here for the Kelme rider when we hit this big climb of the Klausberg. He's been at the front end of the bike race, and the work being done on the front there is the Polmans rider, that's Erwin Thijs. And you can see these riders now really are starting to pay the price of having been at the front of the bike race. But one thing they have achieved is the ability to get themselves an awful lot of publicity for their teams. The man going out of the back right now is Koch. He rides for Vlaanderen 2002 team. Just leaving it at the front there, the Gerolsteiner rider, Ronnie Schultz in the white jersey, and Erwin Thijs on the front. 31 years of age, Erwin Thijs, a very experienced bike rider. I have a feeling, though, that the Vlaanderen rider should be able to just stay in contact over the summit of the climb. They're here on the top now of the Klausbergen. And if we look back, we'll get a chance to see there is the Kelme rider, Rodriguez, suffering a little bit on this first really serious, tough climb.
Yes, and it's only the 4th of 16 climbs in today's Tour of Flanders. So he really is going to find the rest of the race extremely difficult now. Once he loses the gap of the leaders, he might well reclaim it this time, but it'll only be a temporary recovery, I'm sure of that. Kleisberg, first coming in 1955 into the Tour de Flanders. And there is a regrouping of the peloton here as they reorganize themselves. It's rather like the British horse race, the Grand National. It's you survive as long as you can at the front until your legs give out. Bonjour having a little dig at the front now.
Everybody getting very nervous right now because they know that this is the time when the race really does start to explode. And everybody looking for a chance to get themselves off the front. And there's Chippo still up there in 3rd or 4th position. He's looking very confident today, very comfortable. I would say very happy with the weather conditions too, because we know that our Mario, he's not the toughest of guys when it comes to the really bad weather conditions that can reign over the northern part of Europe at this time of the year. But I think obviously super motivated by the fact that he's got this World Cup leaders jersey on his shoulders, and he's looking pretty smart and in good condition right now.
Yes, the Fassa Bortola riders too are thinking of Michele Bartoli. We haven't seen anything of him actually, Paul. Mario Cipollini off to the left. This rider here is Dmitry Konishev, our man from the Tour de France days. First ever Russian rider to lead in the King of the Mountains competition. First ever Russian professional medalist too, which he got a medal at Chambéry when Greg LeMond was the world champion.
Well, he's one of those riders who for the last few years, Phil, has been promising to retire at the end of every season, but he still seems to be coming back for more. And I think very often these guys, when they get to the end of their careers, they feel as if they're a little bit more relaxed, and sometimes that tends to put a couple of years onto a guy's career. 14 climbs left to go in the Ronde van Vlaanderen. The next one is going to be the Knokteberg. But for these riders here, they still have to tackle the Klausberg, which the leading group of 4 riders went over a couple of minutes ago.
And let's look at these riders now. The peloton is still determined not to be split up by the course today. They have these nice runs around good highway before they go off onto the side streets again and onto the cobbled sections of the roads. And if they can just hang on and sort themselves out, they might feel a little bit better when the climbs start. The Knokteberg is still, the Kleisberg is still ahead of the peloton. The Knokteberg is the challenge now for the leaders. And for the moment, at least, with a lot of confusion at the back of the race, are hanging on to their deficit, Paul. It's not descending quite as quickly as it was.
No, but I think once we get into the big climbs, the old Quaremont, we'll see that time gap there jumping down by a couple of minutes at a time.
Rabobank still charging on. Driven on by Karsten Kroon here. Again, he's been very, very active, trying to get something going, but they keep reeling him in. Looks like, is that Robbie Hunter in his slipstream? No, it's not. Yes, it is it? He's a policeman and doesn't want to help too much, but he's going to give him a little go at the moment.
Everybody hoping for the chance to get to the foot of these hills with a big advantage. The big plan for a lot of these guys, if they can just get off the front end of the main field, is what they hope for, is that a group of 15 or 20 riders split off over one of these climbs and they get swept up in the general momentum of the race as it starts to accelerate. Hunter now has decided he would go forward to try and give Mappé the advantage of having more riders at the front end of the bike race. And I think he's settled in very quickly to being an integral part of the Mappé squad. A couple more guys trying to get across here. Looks like that could be Nicolas Jalabert, the rider there from TSC World Online, and a Rabobank rider getting in there as well. But still, the main field very rapid at the front here. Still, US Postal putting a lot of riders to the front here, and I think maybe a little bit too early at the moment, but that's the right time to keep your men at the front as we go into this very early part of all the strategic climbs that really reign over the last 60 kilometers of this bike race, the Ronde van Vlaanderen. Karsten Kroon and Robbie Hunter just off the front of the main field.
Yes, now Hunter's you're obviously right what you said earlier, Paul, that he doesn't seem to be riding to win this race. He's riding with other things in mind here, because here's the sprinter driving on. He says his form is good, and you never know on a Tour de Flanders, because once we get into the fast succession of the climbs, if you are in a leading position and you are on good form, then you can live with it, because Ludo Dierksen did just that last year, and the breakaway finally did stay away.
Well, that's obviously what Robbie Hunter is hoping for just now, but he obviously realizes that the heads of state of Team Mappé are in the main field right now. Men like Andrea Tafi have won World Cup races before, and Stefano Zanini, who's in absolutely superb condition which we saw just a few days ago in the 3 days of La Panne. Probably the best condition he's had for an awful long time. He's ridden well in these tough one-day classes before. He's finished 4th in Paris-Roubaix. He's the kind of rider who, as well, he's been looking for a huge win for many, many years right now, and this may well be the season that he's going to do it. But I think the super tactician Johan Museeuw is the man that all of these riders will not be too worried about until we get to the latter part of the race, because Museeuw has the knack, Phil, of staying in the main field, staying near the front of the main field, but never getting his nose into the wind until it's absolutely necessary.
Yeah, absolutely right. He's a great tactician. Even when he's in a breakaway, you somehow seem to miss him, and the riders seem to have the same problem with Johan. He is a very, very crafty rider, but there the gap is now inside 11 minutes. And this, we're looking down on Karsten Kroon, who is leading Robbie Hunter here, and he said Robbie McEwen. Oh, now they're saying it's Matthew Heyman, another Australian here for Rabobank. So this is another group that's got himself off the front. Here they are.
Well, it's a good move there. They're looking over their shoulder. Paul van Heeft moving across from the Lotto team this year during the winter transfer season to join CSC Tiscali World Online, the team of Laurent Jalabert. Jalabert not riding this race, but his brother Nicolas is in there. That's the third group of riders on the road. Matt Heyman, he's also had a very good start to the season, Phil, I reckon, this year, and he's a man that I think has settled in very quickly to be an integral part of the Rabobank squad. There's the main field. They don't have too much of an advantage, and they will get very quickly swept up once the road tilts up, and it will do that in around about a kilometre or so when they reach the first slopes of the Klausberg or the Mont de l'Enclus. And it's still Antonio Cruz on the front there. Obviously, US Postal, not only do they want to dominate the world of international cycling, Phil, not only in races like the Tour de France, but they feel now they've got a team that can be competitive even in the World Cup one-day races. And Hincapie is in around about 6th or 7th place there, and Lance Armstrong too is riding very close to the front. Armstrong, I think, enjoying his return to the Tour of Flanders. He always enjoys the big occasions, and certainly the Tour of Flanders is a huge occasion. There's Matty White in 3rd position.
Well, Paul, look at this now. US Postal are taking this race so seriously. We would never have seen them ride like this without the presence of Lance Armstrong.
Absolutely not, and I think that's why he came along here, because, you know, he's seen the races on TV in the past where George Hincapie has been completely isolated in races like the Tour of Flanders and the Paris-Roubaix race, and he's come today and he's raised the morale of the whole troop. We've seen this happen at the Tour de France, but now he's decided his presence was required here. He's the general of this team, and that's why he's come up here, and it may well be that it's going to put an awful lot of responsibility on Georgie Hincapie's shoulders to try and win himself the Tour of Flanders. He got, I think, a lot of confidence last year, Phil, when he won Wavell again, because that proved to him finally that he is a rider for the big one-day races, and I think he really enjoys this kind of race. Now there's Heyman and Paul van Heeft coming back into the fold as we expected, and you can see by the pedaling action now that they have reached the early slopes of the Klausberg.
Yes, and this is showing on the screen there, 81 kilometres to go, means that the 4 leaders are already 2 kilometres over the top of this climb, and the gap is down to 10 minutes and a single second now. But this is a very impressive performance today by US Postal. They have driven this race on when it matters. Now, they've ridden a lot like this year as well. And Fred Rodriguez, in the US Champions jersey with the stars and stripes, is taking full advantage of the hard work being done by the American team. But he'll be looking to lead Johan Museeuw and even himself to the line today.
Well, Rodriguez had a pretty tough year last year. Apart from the national championships, he really did seem to struggle for the form that he had a couple of years ago. But coming up second in Milan-San Remo will have given him an awful lot of confidence as well. There is Stefan Weissermann on the left-hand side, but Armstrong, amazing that face of his, Phil. It's complete and utter concentration.
It is, isn't it?
When this guy comes out, and bear in mind this is his 5th day of racing this year, this is the kind of performance we never would have expected possible in previous years. And look at Matt White's face. Ooh, that shows the pain that the Mont de l'Enclus is giving these riders as we look at the back end of the main field, and that's Jackie Durand, a former winner of this bike race.
Yeah, it's fabulous riding this, and Matty White there, the workhorse of US Postal, the Australian from Sydney, is driving it on at the front now, giving it his best shot here to keep them in contention, to make it hard for those who can follow. Rodriguez has recovered from his little journey over the Klausberg. He's back in the action here, back up with the 4 leaders. There are the names for you as we're heading out towards the Konokterberg now. We're just about to start that climb. This is a nasty little one, Paul. Stabs at the legs. There you can see it in the distance.
It really is a nasty little climb, and it's one of those tough climbs that it actually starts to get steeper and steeper as you get closer to the summit. So you actually hit this climb with absolutely no momentum at all. These guys are really going to suffer on this climb, as you'll see when we flick back to the main field in a few moments' time, just how quickly they are going to charge up this mountain here of the Konokterberg. The 4 leaders, they know right now that the race is happening behind. They know just exactly how the Ronde van Vlaanderen is going to unfold, and they realize that the big attacks are starting to come, and they can only hope that they will survive and manage to get onto the back end of one of these big groups that are certainly going to come over the summit of the Old Quaremont in a few moments' time. But at the back here, Phil, you can see Rodriguez is not very happy at all with the steepness of the Konokterberg.
Well, we're looking now at 79 kilometers remaining, and one rider has got himself right off the front here, the most experienced of the group, Erwin Thijs. Decided the 3 others haven't quite got it now. He's at home in his own country as Erwin moves away and leaves the other 3 to their fate. So it looks like the Konokterberg is the graveyard for the breakaway. It'll tumble down pretty rapidly now. They got together at around 32 kilometers, the 4 of them coming together. And since then they have led this race by almost 20 minutes. The gap is inside 10 now as we climb the Konokterberg, and Erwin Thijs has pushed on alone.
When they get to the summit of this, they actually turn left, and they are, if they could go straight on and take a shortcut, they would be actually at the same point at the summit of the Old Quaremont, but they have to drop down into the town of Kruisberg, go around a small loop at the bottom, and then they will attack the Old Quaremont. And these guys right now, they're going to get picked up pretty rapidly indeed, because you can see the impetus is completely gone for them. Erwin Thijs has decided that he will carry on alone and try to survive as long as possible, but almost certainly now this is announcing the end of the breakaway. It is still a huge time advantage of 9 minutes and 47 seconds, but you can see even Thijs, who's opened up a gap over his former breakaway companions, he hasn't got the power to get up this climb, and he will lose an awful lot of time over the next 10 or 15 kilometers.
And there's the gap inside 10 minutes. So Erwin is determined to grab a little bit more publicity for his Palmans team. It's a small team in Belgium, but gets away with a lot of good victories over a year in his own country. And now he's getting all of the plaudits of the crowd by himself. But the gap inside 10 minutes, there you can see 9:46. And they're not really chasing these riders down. They have a real big infight going on back in that peloton, and it's being spearheaded by US Postal. A lot of strong riders on that team, Paul, are willing to throw the weight behind that team. And remember, at the end of the day, the theory is they're doing it all for George Hincapie, but we've still a long way to go yet.
A very good point that you brought up there, Phil, because it's almost at the moment as if we're looking at 2 races. These 4 guys are racing against each other, just trying to stay off the front end of the main field, but the main field are not taking any notice at all of them. They may well occasionally just have a quick check to see what the time gap is, but they know that the pressure of their race here further down the road will almost certainly pull those leaders back into the fold without the necessity of having to organize a strong chase at the front. They will have been very careful when that breakaway formed early on to make sure they knew the composition and made sure that they didn't have a guy like Jackie Durand, who they would have then had a pretty hard time pulling back into the fold.
Rouen is where we are, and the gap continues at a pace held here by US Postal, with the rest just queuing up behind and nobody offering to help. They know the tactics as well, of course. They know they're relying on a victory for George Hincapie, but they have that added double barb to the hook today with Armstrong as well. These are the breakaways of Hunter and Karsten Kroon, picked up by the chase. So everybody back together now. Just the 4 breakaways who themselves have split up are clear. Robbie Hunter taking a good look over his shoulder to feel the pressure from US Postal. Now accelerates. Hunter's not done for, I would think.
No, it's amazing. The punchy style of Robbie Hunter there, Phil, really is quite remarkable. He's a great bike rider, very aggressive, and it was good to see him start the season off so well, because we always regarded him really basically just as a pure sprinter, but to come up with that individual time trial victory proves to me that in a couple of years' time, Robbie Hunter could be the kind of rider who will have the ability to win some of the shorter 4 or 5 day bike races.
Well, next on the menu is the Old Quaremont, coming at 69 kilometers, so it's just 6 kilometers to go now to that climb. A climb we've never seen in the Tour of Flanders for 15 years. and this is going to prove a most interesting ascent. The road is slightly wider than the old climb. The cobblestones were painstakingly replaced one by one for this climb right through the winter. At one stage, Paul, it was touch and go. It would be ready for the race, but it is, and the crowd awaits the arrival now of this year's Tour of Flanders.
Funnily enough, I actually spoke to Lance Armstrong yesterday, and I was talking about the change of the Tour of Flanders route since he raced back in 1995. And he said, well, I haven't been to look at the course. He said, all I'm going to do is just follow George Hincapie around. And he said, at the end of the day, the only thing to do is to ride at the front anyway and keep out of trouble.
Well, and that's exactly what they've been doing, because we've seen all the chaos at the back, and the US Postal have used their strength now to control what is, as you can see, a very much depleted peloton now.
The main field will start to get smaller and smaller as we get into the cobble climb section of this bike race here, but it's all really now a question of elimination by the rear. There's Freddie Rodriguez, not getting a lot of help from his teammates right now, but very sensibly riding all of the time close to the front. Armstrong has got his men in fine form right now. Now these are Van Petergem's men. There's a crash at the back here. Oh, somebody's gone down from Crédit Agricole, and that looks as if it was Thor Husvod, the big Swedish rider there.
It is. Now that's a big blow to Crédit Agricole, because he is their young star and likely to replace Stuart O'Grady here at the top of the team pile, because O'Grady himself looking unlikely at the moment to ride in the Tour de France. That's how he did it. And Paul, that was a very painful way to sit down. His saddle has snapped. That's what happened. His saddle bolt snapped, and he lost it completely. That was a nasty shock and a very painful fall.
Very lucky to get out of that as well without too much of an injury. A very sensible move too, because you saw him picking up his 2 bottles at the side of the road there, because it's always an important thing to make sure you still remain calm and collected in a situation like that. A lot of riders tend to panic when they have an accident or an incident like that, but that actually doesn't gain you anything at all. You have to try and remain calm, wait for the team mechanic to come up to you. If he comes, then you're back in the bike race. If he doesn't, well, it's all over for the day.
So 73 kilometers to go, and the group is all together again. What's left of them now? Husvod is going to be chasing behind, hopefully, for Crédit Agricole. And it looks as though the impetus for the moment, the fire out of the peloton. It won't be for long, because they're all now extremely nervous as they are beginning to approach the climb of the old Kwaremont.
Well, the main field here has still got to hit the Knokteberg, because they are still a couple of kilometers behind the leaders. The one leader now, who is Erwin Thijs, being chased by 3 other riders. There you can see moving forward, the Mappe rider is Andrea Tafi. Freddie Rodriguez is always pretty much to the front, and 1 or 2 more jerseys starting to appear here from Domo Farfrieds, and there is Johan Museo. You see, he knows the important parts of this race.
Magic.
He knows the tactics, and he knows when he has to be at the front, and boom, all of a sudden there he is.
So 8 minutes after the leaders split up on this climb, here comes the peloton, the Knokteberg for them. Again, a reasonably new climb to the Tour de Flanders. Only first climbed in 1997, climbing it now for the 6th time.
Matty White on the front there. He's a tough bike rider, Matty White. Doesn't win very many bike races, but he certainly is a super asset for the US Postal Service. He was very upset last year that he didn't make the selection for the Tour de France, but I tell you one thing, he always comes out and he's always consistent throughout the season. They can count on this man. This Aussie is a tough bike rider and very much at home on roads like this. But right now, you get an idea of what professional bike racing teams are all about. Matt White today is riding for George Hincapie and Lance Armstrong. It doesn't matter whether he finishes this bike race or not. The important thing is to make sure that his men get into the strategic points in a position without having had any difficulties.
That's all he has to do, and it'll be a professional job well done. So here's Matty White on the front now, and sets the pace nice. It looks like Servais Knaven there in second wheel, just for the moment at least, doing his job for Domo. This is life at the back of the peloton here, and still riding well is just about, well, you can see the hole in his shorts, but Thor Hushovd has arrived at the back. But as I say, it's a very painful sit down on the road that was. But he's got his bike and he shows his sheer class, and he's got himself back into the back of this group.
On the right hand side there in a white jersey, Michele Bartley. A little bit of a problem with the neck. I know how that feels, because I've sat on plenty of planes so far this year. but for Husvod, a very difficult crash. Unfortunately, now he's back up and on a spare machine. Psychologically, that's not a whole lot of fun in a bike race like this, and that's why he's just sitting at the back at the moment. He'll hope to recover over the next kilometre or so. He knows that this race is not going to decide the Tour of Flanders, but what he will try and do is once they get over the summit of the Konokterberg on the big wide road down into Kruisbergen, he will try and move up the outside and get himself into a good position for the next big climb, the one that I always feel is a very important strategic climb, the Old Quaremont. There is Armstrong, looking very comfortable there, moving up into second position there. Hincapie's there in third. Servais Knaven, as you said, Phil, is also very close to the front right now.
Pirate Bay winner last year, and that's Buxhofer in the Phonak, who he's dropped back a bit now. He's gone back 3 men. Armstrong concentrating here on the back wheel of his teammate. He'd be very impressed, I think, with Matty White's hard work today. But they are riding a very, very clever race at the moment. They've got the strength to do just that, it seems. Let's hope they're not selling it out too soon, because although it's only 71 kilometres to go, these are a vicious 71 kilometres. And we must not forget the wind will be on their noses as they come through the final climbs. But Matt White is giving 110% right now to keep this race under control. Hincapie has come right up behind his team captain, although reversal roles there, I think, because Armstrong says he's going to make it for George today, and this could have a fairy tale result for the US Postal Riders. A little bit early to say that, I think, as they come towards the top of the Konokterberg, and well done to the Australian, because he's ridden a superb climb, Matt White, and kept control of the head of this race.
It hurts. You can see by his face he's really hurting right now, but he doesn't care because he knows he doesn't have to finish the Tour of Flanders. He knows that the general and the second in command, George Hincapie, are there on his wheel. A little bit further back, this is the former winner of the bike race, Jackie Durand. He's going to try and use his experience here, but I think his experience is not going to be that much of a help once he gets over the summit of this climb, as we now go straight over to the Kemmelberg. We are now back with Erwin Thijs, the Old Quaremont, I should say.
I thought we'd shot forward a few miles there, Paul. Yes, this is the Old Quaremont. We're coming in part way through here, but there's the cobblestones as we're seeing now. The climb here by Erwin Thijs, and the big crowd on the roadside. And 8 minutes 22. Now, well, they've stopped showing the group in between, but they're falling away, and they'll be picked up much quicker, I think, than this rider. He might survive a while yet, because now he's on his own. He seems content to set the pace as he trundles that gear up towards the summit of this climb. There's still the Koppenberg to come, remember, the one that they've rebuilt. But as they head up towards the top of this climb, it's a climb which Paul and I ride on occasion every time we come to Belgium at this time of the year. But you can't see it, but just round to the right there's a little coffee shop, and that's where you find us about now. But for Matt White, I'm afraid he's still 70 kilometres from his coffee.
Well, it's a tough climb. In fact, the first part of the climb is reasonably steep, but I always find the hardest part of this climb is actually when you ride out of the town here of Quaremont and you go onto this false flat. It really is then when the main field literally explodes through the pressure of the big boys on the front end. And there's a huge crowd out here on the Old Quaremont this afternoon. And Erwin Thijs,
one of the biggest, in fact.
It's a massive crowd, and I think it's a lot to do with the fact that it's absolutely superb, the weather here in Belgium today. It really is abnormal for this time of year. But the one thing that is still there and always seems to be present in Belgium is the wind. Look at that flag. Once he gets to the top here, we're now starting to head towards the east mainly, and that's towards the finish line in Merbeke. And nearly all of the time from now on to the finish, these riders will have either a headwind or a cross headwind.
Yes, at the moment it's cross coming from the right of our screen as we look. But you know, this is a marvellous couple of hours for Erwin Thijs now to lead the Tour of Flanders when you are a Belgian in what are his twilight years as a professional cyclist. 31 years of age, and the crowd here in Belgium appreciate one of their own setting the pace. 61 victories for Belgium cyclists out of a possible 86. It's a marvellous record. And now this man is about to find smoother road, and which he'll certainly enjoy. But he's ridden the Koppenberg well today, the Old Quaremont rather well. But if we've seen a crowd like we've just seen on the Old Quaremont, I'm just wondering what we can expect to be greeted with on the new climb of the Koppenberg.
I think it's going to be absolute and utter chaos. It always was. And I think a lot of people will go back there because this is a fairly historic Ronde van Vlaanderen, bringing back the Koppenberg into this race. He's almost at the summit here, and he will come up onto a road called the Ronde van Vlaanderen Straat. And in fact, as he turns left there, he's going to take in a little bit of extra cobblestones that the race has managed to find over the last couple of years. This now is the main field. A little bit further back, they're on the descent now down off the summit of the Konokterberg, and very shortly they will take a right-hand turn in Kreisbergen at the top. They'll ride alongside the Skelde for a short while, then they will turn up, and they too will then be on the same cobblestones as we were looking at Erwin Tyson a few moments ago.
Bit difficult to count them right now, but I would say about 40-45 men left in the Tour of Flanders as we head now into the last 70 kilometers of the race. The gap comes inside, 8 minutes to the leader. Now we're flashing back here. Now what are they going to show us? Another delay by a crash, I suspect. Remember, these are live pictures, so we're as surprised as you are when they hit us, but no, just a slowing of the peloton, and they're all regrouped. I think there might have been somebody fell in the middle there, but we never got to see them. They've got a headwind just now, as we saw by those flags.
A little bit of respite for the moment. These guys know these roads to absolute perfection, especially the Belgian riders. They're always moving up. They always know exactly when they want to be on the front. It's 1.1 kilometers now to the start of the Old Quaremont. It's a very difficult climb, and the road is so narrow. It's only wide enough for about 5 or 6 bike riders. Yeah. And if you're not in the first 10 or 15, the race nearly always splits there, and a lot of groups of 15-20 riders start to separate and form on the big dual carriageway on the top.
Well, I reckon that this is going to see the start of something on this climb, because it is a very tough climb. It is hard to get your wheels to bite in as you make the ascent, and if you don't get a good clean run at it and you slip a gear, then you block the whole peloton, and that's it. And so this is going to be the most interesting climb, and the riders who are strong have got to go on to this climb, I think, for what, the first 10?
It's best to go in at least in the first 10, because it's almost impossible to pass anybody on this climb, and you need to be there really, because when they do accelerate over the summit, it is a tough climb indeed. Up again near the front of the main field, you get a chance there to see Erik Zabel, and again we're looking at a very strategic point of the Tour of Flanders, which is why again it's almost like a race finish. We've got Team Telecom leading it out as if they were leading out Erik Zabel at the finish of a stage of the Tour de France, because these guys know now as they get onto this very narrow street that now the Tour of Flanders is starting in earnest.
And look at the Telecom team. The other tactic is to come to the front and fan across the road and block anybody making the move. Fred Rodriguez is tucked nicely in off to the left of our picture. Dirksens is up here. Lance on. George Hincapie is tucked in with those white glasses on. And little Paolo Bettini is the man in the centre with the white crash helmet. And that's just what they've done, Paul. They've actually fanned out and blocked the road.
On the right-hand side there is also Mario Cipollini. So Cipollini looking for something today. He wants to keep that leader's jersey in the World Cup competition for as long as possible. But Team Telecom did the perfect move there. They got Erik Zabel into the first 4 or 5 places. And I wonder where Lance Armstrong is. I saw, like you did, George Hincapie there. I would think Armstrong won't be too far away from him. And you can see it's amazing how the race is absolutely split to pieces. A lot of riders have disappeared from the rear end of the main field right now. Rated with 4 stars, the Old Quaremont. The average gradient there, Phil, is only 4.2%, but the climb itself is a very long climb, and it carries on over the summit. The first part, I would say, is closer to 10%, but the long, gradual false flat over the top is where most of the damage is done.
First come in 1974, and has been climbed every year since this mountain. We'll call them mountains, I think, down this end of the world, because there isn't anything better or higher. But you see the second tactic being deployed now. Block the road and stop anybody getting past you. The race was all to get to the front for that bend at the bottom, which the Telecom won. And now they've got complete control. And Mario Cipollini, you know, this man isn't just a sprinter. He's a very clever bike rider. He's always in the place when he's got ambition. And I think he is very much inspired this particular season. I was actually with him in South Africa and saw him training through the month of December, and you could tell by the way he was applying himself, he had great ambitions this year.
Now the man that we very rarely see until the most important times of this race has moved into the second line there, Johan Museo. That's Schiandri on the front there as well for the Lamprey squad. So Schiandri again, like last year, looking to get himself in the right place at the right tactical time here. Now then, Zabel is in second place. Weissermann is up there as well. Amazing to see that Mario Cipollini on the Old Quaremont is at the moment in 4th position. But let's just see how Johan Museo reacts to this climb.
Yes, and nice. Weissermann is the rider dodging around on the right here now, as he's seen the way up the climb. They make it look so easy on television. Believe me, this is a nasty little climb, and at this particular point is quite steep. But they've got a really good tempo going. Doesn't look so easy from the back, from the helicopter, does it? As the leaders now are setting the pace, and Telecom in control as they get into the steepest part of this 11% climb. 8:11, Musubi inside 8 minutes to the one leader, really. Remember, there are still 3 in between, but we've lost sight of them for the moment. But they're probably only 4 minutes, maybe 5 minutes ahead now.
Well, that group is starting to split up somewhat. What a great ride being done by Telecom today, and what a turn up for the books for Eric Zabel if he would be able to stay at the front end of this bike race. I think, though, Team Telecom's tactics on the Quaremont here are really to look after Stefan Weissermann, who over the last couple of years, Phil, really has matured into a one-day classics rider, and especially a specialist for the Tour of Flanders and as well for Paris-Roubaix in a week's time. This is Andreas Clear on the front, and you can see these two guys have opened up a pretty serious gap. There's the coffee shop that you were talking about there. This is the flatter part of the course now, and I tell you one thing, it really is difficult as we get a glimpse there of Erwin Thijs. He is now actually on the slopes of the Paterberg.
Yes, and he is approximately 4 kilometers ahead on the road now of these two riders, and that is what separates the complete field really in the Tour of Flanders, because riders who are left behind at this stage know all the back roads back to the showers. At least they get the hot water when they get through to Meerbeker. The two Telecom boys are taking advantage of that strong show by the US Postal Service and now putting in their tactic, which is to try and get Stefan Weissermann up to the front, which they've done. But I don't see Zabel in this group at the minute.
Not for the moment. He disappeared pretty quickly there. In second position in the second group coming across there is Georgi Hincapie. He knows how to pay attention. There's Stefano Zanini coming across right now, and Freddie Rodriguez. There is Johan Museo. Now look at this. This is
He's
power.
An amazing guy.
He's a brilliant bike rider, one of the best classic bike riders of the last 10 or 15 years. He knows exactly where he has to be, but you notice he only used enough energy to be in the right place at the right time. He is waiting till later on in this bike race. And when you think, Phil, of all of the difficulties he's been through over the last few years of his career, with that terrible crash in Paris-Roubaix and then the motorbike accident, it's amazing that this guy keeps coming back to the top level of the sport.
And he's on form. Let's not forget he's had third in the recent Grand Prix Harelbeke, or the Grand Prix E3, which is named after the local highway here. Also had a stage win in the Gilden Sport 2-day race in Holland. So he's got good form and coming back from all of his ailing problems, and is looking for a 4th record victory in the Tour of Flanders. He's watching everything right now. Museo will not make a move until he gets to the hill he loves most, which is the Muur de Grammont. That's where he'll go. If he's in a group, he'll try it there and see what comes of the move, and then try and consolidate over the final climb of the day, the Bosberg. And once you're at the top of that, you are just 7 miles from the finish, and there's trouble on the climb. Riders locking up now. That's what happens if you slip a gear or get interfered with. You simply don't make the top.
I'm not sure whereabouts in the field that was, because that was a certain amount of chaos. It must have been at the rear end of the main field that incident happened there. But at the front end of the main field is where this race really is important on the old Quaremont. In about 50 meters time, they will turn onto the huge highway which links Ronse with Kruisbergen, and that is where for a few moments these guys have got a chance to bring themselves back into the race.
And now there's the incident again, and what happened there, and the rider in trouble was Wilfried Kretskins. If you get off this road, Paul, and into the grass, sometimes the lip of the cobbles means you can't get back onto the road.
Very dangerous indeed, and as long as you've got a bit of momentum, you can actually jump back onto the cobblestones, but it's a very dangerous thing to do. Not so bad today because the road is dry, but you try a maneuver like that in the wet and you're very quickly on your backside. Now this is what the old Quaremont is all about. It's separated the men from the boys. The cream has come to the top right now, and you can see 1 or 2 of the big names moving forward. They will sit back for just a kilometre or so to see who is there, make sure that none of the big guys are actually missing, and I would say there are around about 25 guys in that group right now, and they are the most important men. So far, Johan Museo has made the junction. Look at him there in 3rd position. Andrea Tafi has made it as well. You see the big names know how important the old Quaremont is. Zanini's there in 2nd.
This is a very good move. It had to come on that narrow climb. Now the strong men are free to apply the will on the Tour de Flanders. The gap is very manageable at 7:34. They will know that the breakaway has split at the front, only one man out front now. They know his reputation, they know his ability, they know they'll wipe him out in the last few climbs of the day. But now they're free to operate new tactics once they assess just who has made the split. But be careful, because you know that there is a bunch behind, and not very far behind. If our helicopter swung right, we'd probably see it about 200 meters. Quite a large peloton trying to rejoin these 25 leaders. And that's what I counted too, 25 men up front. And we've seen Johan Museo with George Hincapie is certainly here. We know that Stefan Wesserman is here. Hopefully Lance Armstrong is here too. He should be. He was in the right position when the split went. Oh, we can get a little glimpse now. One lone motorcyclist coming around that corner. There they are. Now that is the second chase, which might get across.
They don't have much chance to do it because we're actually dropping down here, and in about 1 kilometer's time we're going to hit the Paterberg, and immediately the road kicks back up once again. And these guys, you can be absolutely certain, will hammer up the Paterberg because they realize they have an advantage right now. They have split off around about 30 riders into the second group of what was the main peloton just a few moments ago, and they will try and keep hold of that advantage because they would like to go to the Koppenberg in a situation like this where there is no confusion of dropped riders coming up and riding to the front, because this is fine for them right now. They know who they've got in the group. They know that the race is about to start in earnest. They know that this is the moment when the big decisions are going to happen.
There's only 3 kilometers in fact from the top of the climb that they've just come over, the old Quaremont, to the start of the Paterberg climb, so that's less than 2 miles. So if they can consolidate a little gap, then surely on the climb they'll begin to pull away. 7:24 now and 63 kilometers, just on 40 miles left to race. The way they're going today, that's about an hour and a half still to ride to the end of the 86 Tour de Flanders. And Erwin Thijs has had all day out there to sell himself, but very soon there's going to be a bunch of very top class bike riders coming up to him. And it's good to see that Fred Rodriguez, inspired by his absolutely brilliant second place in Milan-San Remo, is inspired by his riding down there today as well.
Caught a quick glimpse, in fact, on the old Quaremont of Michele Bartoli. Looking down the line, I can't see him just now, as we get an indication that the 4-starred Paterberg at 20% is the next climb of the day, and Freddie Rodriguez is the first man onto it.
Oh, dear old Fred, and it's 1 in 5 this climb in old money. As he now starts to hurt them, he really is riding well. He's found his legs this year, his second year as American champion. The field are marking him, but then the field is now only 24 strong behind him there. The win of the Tour de Flanders, I suspect, might come from that. There's the turn of what is, we'll call now, the main peloton. The men who got balked or missed out in the split on the climb. There's Fred, and there's Peter van Petegem to the left of our picture on his shoulder now. Michele Bartoli is in here. I think Zabel is up here. Bettini certainly is. Looking back for US Postal. Don't let us down now, boys. Can't see them at the moment, but we know they're in there.
Well, I got a glimpse of Georgie Hincapie just a few moments ago. Freddie Rodriguez today doing a great job for Johan Museo, and this is a picture, Phil, of why you have to try and stay at the front on the old Quaremont, because the next climbs are so narrow that you actually can almost only ride in single file. There is Van Petegem suffering a little bit there. Michele Bartoli just in front of him. Paolo Bettini is the next man coming forward. This is turning out to be a brilliant Ronde van Vlaanderen, but I don't think we've ever seen a bad one anyway. No. This is one of the best bike races in the world, and Armstrong says he reckons this bike race is even tougher than Paris-Roubaix.
In many, many ways it is. There are always huge crowds because Belgium is the hotbed of world cycling. The people here are nuts on the sport. Now look at this problem on the climbs, and the rider from Benesto who is in a bit of trouble there is Xavier Zandio. As a team coast rider bites the dust and doesn't look too happy with that, and that in fact is Beckham Christensen. Oh, it's chaos out there. That's why you've got to be strong and stay at the front and keep out of the aggravation.
That's why those guys in that small group of 25 riders off the front there wanted to insist, because they know what kind of chaos happens at the back. There's a US Postal rider at the back of the group there, and that in fact is Pavel Padrinos. But these guys have got to try and get themselves over this climb, because in just a few more kilometers time they're going to do exactly the same thing again on the Koppenberg. But right now we've got that 25-man strong group going over the front of this climb together.
But make no mistake, this is why the crowd came, because they get a chance to touch their heroes and give them a leg up. Jean-Patrick Nazon, the sprinter on La Française des Jeux, was walking there as well. Meanwhile, back at the front, it's over the top and on with the Tour of Flanders. The gap is 7 minutes, and very soon we'll be lining up for the Koppenberg. And that is the next climb on the menu. Erwin Thijs can't be too far away. It's 61 kilometers to go, because the Koppenberg for him is just 3 kilometers in front of him, and that's the top of the climb. So he's about 2.5 kilometers from it now.
Well, the Tour of Flanders hasn't been here, Phil, since 1987. It's going to be amazing to see this. I raced the Koppenberg a few times in my career, and I never actually was able to get up it on a bicycle in the race.
Oh, you do let me down sometimes, Paul. I thought
well, I can only tell you the truth.
You never actually walked up it. Now you're telling me you never actually rode up it. It is a horrible climb. At least the old version was. We don't know how the new version is going to react yet to the arrival of the Tour de Flanders, nor how many people we can expect to see on the climb. I know that the police were closing one of the national highways for parking of cars to allow people to walk to the climb. They certainly weren't going to risk any cars going to it. There's your man of the Tour de Flanders, 3-time winner Johan Museeuw, now announcing the fact he's at the front. Daniele Nardello, champion of Italy, tucked in just behind him. Another man who's a remarkable classics rider as well as an outstanding stage race rider. This looks as though we've got Andrea Tafi setting the pace now. Another great bike rider coming to the end of his career, but never short of firepower in those big legs. They always look a bit bent the way he rides the bike, but he's such a strong man.
So you look at that pedaling action right now, and he's producing an awful lot of power out of those legs. Coming across there, one of the riders from Domo, and in fact not too far away right now from the Koppenberg, as we come to the 7th climb of the day. 5 stars, 22% gradient, and this man is really going to suffer. And I wonder if he's going to make it on the bike.
Well, Paul, he's going to be a star, isn't he? Because here's Erwin Thijs bringing the Tour de Flanders back to the Koppenberg with a lead of nearly 7 minutes when he was one stage 20 ahead. But he gets to see the climb first. He'll get the glory, and he'll be remembered for taking the race onto it.
I don't think he's thinking about any glory right now. You can look at the pain. He's having a hard time just keeping those legs ticking over right now, because he's been at the front of the bike race, Phil, for around about 200 kilometers. And the thing now is it really is starting to kick into those thighs of his. He's going to have to just try and get it into the lowest gear possible. And the problem with these steep climbs, these 22, 25% grades, is you can't get out of the saddle, because if he gets out of the saddle, he's going to lose all of his traction.
Yes. And it was about here where Alan Piper fell off in his long breakaway, and the commissaire ran over him, which made Alan Piper twice as famous as he was before that. But right now we are looking here at a man whose legs are aching. As Paul has said, almost 200 kilometers in the lead, and he's got to face this, and then he's still got to go over the top to the finish with the best part of 60k to go. But this is the new climb. The crowd have been fanned out onto the side. It is a nice crowd. They can't get many more at the summit there. Just look ahead of the rider. And it looks as though they made a lovely job of the road. But the cobblestones are probably too smooth for the purists now.
Absolutely brilliant. Now, they've done a magic job there putting this road back into the Tour of Flanders, and I would have to say that Erwin Thijs will put that down in his picture book, and I'm sure there's plenty of people got photographs of him being the first bike rider to come back to the Koppenberg after all of those years.
Sorry, Paul, that reminds me, it wasn't Alan Piper, it was Jesper Skibby, wasn't it, the Great Dane. He likes me when I call him the Great Dane, who was knocked off his bike well, he fell off the bike. The commissaire ran over the wheels of his bike after that. Here we are back with the Mepe boys now. Bettini, Zanini setting the pace. These are the riders now continuing a private battle. It looks like they've got a little split going here.
This is a pretty serious part of the race here.
We've got Zanini in this group.
Zanini there, and looking a bit further back down to see if Peter van Pietigem has made this split. This race really is starting to be rather interesting here. There is Tafi, Bettini. Now this is rather a good move here by Mepe, Phil. They've got 3 riders in this split off the front.
They have.
And it looks very much as if Johan Museeuw has been caught out. Michele Bartoli, the cat, just on the back there.
Also, I noted there Enrico Cassani was the Domo rider who got into the break. He was working very hard. Another Italian who rides on the Belgian setup. But this must have happened off camera on the climb of the Peterberg last time, the previous climb. And obviously they're going to look forward to an approach up the Koppenberg. Serge Baguet sitting at the back, another man who could spring a big surprise today. He had a very good Amstel Gold, it was last year, on his comeback year, having retired, said that's it, and then decided he loved cycling so much he came back, and he came back in a big way.
Well, after all of that hard work by US Postal, they seem to have missed out right now. This is one of the survivors of that leading group of 4 riders. This is the Vlaanderen rider, Jan Koeks. He is around about 2.5 minutes behind the lone leader and approximately 3 minutes in front of the front part of that split containing the big stars of Mapei. Interesting to see Mapei adopting their usual tactic there. 3 men in that front splint, and it seems as if Johan Museo, George Hincapie and Lance Armstrong have missed out for the moment.
Well, let's hope they can repair this damage, because this is a serious stage of the race. To lose ground to some of the riders in this breakaway, and not all of the best men are here yet, but the big worry is Museo.
He's there. I just spotted him.
He's right.
He's
there.
amazing. I didn't see him.
Look at the gap, though. The reaction's coming. George is coming across.
I didn't see him the first time there. It looked as if he'd missed out. There is Hincapie. Nardello now chasing. Robbie Hunter, the South African rider, he's still in there as well.
And I think there are only 2 US Postal riders left now in the hunt. Hunter is trying to get across the gap, and so too Fred Rodriguez. The reaction is serious enough. Hincapie there is best of them. I'm not sure that the other rider is Armstrong, but we'll get a glimpse. He's riding at the back of this second group, which is coming up, as they've just caught the poor old Kelme rider Rodriguez. There he comes, swept back and out of it after his long day in the saddle. But they look how much time he lost to the leader, 6.5 minutes, and they've picked him up.
Well, once you get to this part of the course, it really is easy to lose half a minute to a minute on every one of these cobble climbs, and that's what's happening to what remains of that 4-man leading group in this bike race. There was an attack came off the front there, and I thought by the style it looked very much like Andrea Tafi. But you know, I think that is Johan Museo as well, who's leapt across there.
It looks like Museo is leading to me.
It really is remarkable, this guy. I didn't see him in the first time we went through that group, and I thought he'd missed out. Then all of a sudden we went back to check, and there he was.
Yes, you can always tell Museo, because he tends to do a lot of head switching and looking around. Once he's got a move on, he wants everybody to either contribute or get out of it, and that's what he's doing right now. But this is an interesting move. He's put a lot of pressure on the other riders now to come out and get him. Whoever that rider is, Mapei, is tailing off the back at the moment. We think it's little Paolo Bettini as we head on to the Koppenberg for what is the peloton kind of right now. And there's the gap as they start the Koppenberg, 6:23.
Well, it's come down dramatically from when we first came on the air, and that was 20 minutes the advantage those 4 riders had. And now we're onto the Koppenberg for the main field. The big stars are all in this group right now. It's only 600 meters, but they've made an absolutely superb job here. There's Hincapie just getting across there with Daniele Nardello, and that will now make another Mapei rider in this small group of select riders now. Mapei, 4 riders present as Paolo Bettini comes to the front.
But how this race has changed in the last 15-20 kilometers from the US Postal driving the race on. We've now only got their favourite, Hincapie, trying to fight his way back into the frame here, as Paolo Bettini is the first to see the climb. He starts to give it his best shot as well. There's a little group trying to get back on. That'll give us 1 more US Postal rider in the breakaway, which makes 2. And I think that will be it for them now as they start the climb here. Bettini, like riders before him, these men have to do their best to sit in the saddle and hold that bike on the cobbles. If you get out of the saddle, the chances are you'll pick it up off the floor and fall backwards. This is a steep little climb here. Van Petergem, there he is, coming through screen now, still very much a favourite. Here comes your man George Hincapie. Daniele Nardello is through as well. Fred Rodriguez is also tagged on, having a great day out today, and it is Lance Armstrong, the only other man left now from US Postal.
Well, that's why he came to the Ronde van Vlaanderen. There's Mario Cipollini as well. Cippo is still in it. Cipollini is still there. That is absolutely remarkable.
Well, they're going to worry about him if he keeps this up. If he gets over the top of this, because it's such a steep climb, he's a big man, Cipollini, and in a little bit of trouble at the back. Stefan Westermann looks as though he might be losing ground.
That's a surprise to see him here. There's the remainder of the main field in the Tour of Flanders. There's still the possibility that these riders can survive. There are a couple of riders in here for the US Postal Service that in fact looks like the young rider Tom Bonen, the Belgian rider. He will be super motivated today. 21 years of age, his first attempt here at the big Tour of Flanders. He's ridden the amateur version, but he will be just trying to keep himself in contact, thinking about how the requirements will be for George Hincapie and Lance Armstrong in the latter part of this race.
Interestingly enough, I think that was Dierksens who was heading up the climb from this chase, so he's missed on the split as well. A lot of the teammates of Cipollini, if they could get back, would help him, but at the moment they're in trouble. This is a select bunch, but losing ground to the breakaway.
Rolf Aldag in there, the Telecom rider, just going through in the pink jersey. But certainly this race has really exploded. Really, Phil, in only just 10 kilometers of racing. That's why it is so important to ride near the front on the old Quaremont, because that's where the race literally explodes for the first time in the afternoon.
That's where it all happened, on the narrow climb of the old Quaremont, where we saw Telecom position themselves very well. And we're looking now to see Gianluca Bortolami, last year's winner. We just got a tail end shot of him in that second group. And he's now may have to play second fiddle to other Italian riders who have made the selection. Looking down, this is the turn of the chase group onto the Koppenberg. Because of the narrow slopes, I see we've noted our motorbikes. Somebody went down there, overshot the bend.
I think it might have been Stefan Wesemann. It looked like a pink jersey, but it was difficult to see from that altitude. The race now breaking apart and coming back together again here all of the time. That attack there looks very similar to the style of Andrea Tafi. Well, if it's not the style, it certainly is the kind of tactic that Tafi adopts. He just keeps throwing hand grenades into the main field now and just trying to get himself off the front. What he tries to do is fatigue the other riders. He attacks so many times and just hopes eventually they'll look the other way and say, well, let him go off the front for a bit.
Well, Mapei are well represented up here just now, and they could be the big danger team, but one or two favourites have lived up to their ranking. Peter van Petegem, Johan Museeuw, they are in the lead group, and George Hincapie as well. But funnily enough, in the weekend papers, all the journalists, probably recognising the name Armstrong more than Hincapie, was naming Armstrong as the favourite over Hincapie, when we knew all the time that Armstrong has always said he's in this race to ride for George Hincapie, but we'll see. Steenbeck-Dries is the climb we're on now, and this climb is coming at 52 kilometers from the finish once we're over the top of it.
Well, the man we're looking at right now, Erwin Thijs, really much more known as a Kermes rider, the small races that abound around Belgium. He won 3 small Kermesses last year.
Well, this is the first time the race has been over this climb. 700 meters long, and it looks as though Erwin Thijs is grabbing every second of publicity. This has been a fabulous show of defiance by him, and giving his Palmans team in the country where it matters, his home country of Belgium, plenty of exposure.
Well, that's the important thing for some of these smaller Belgian teams, to get their name on TV as much as possible. You can see by his style here that he really is not enjoying these cobble climbs at all. But the race behind has really begun for the big names in this year's Tour of Flanders. It was good to see that Armstrong had made it there to that junction, but I think he was having a bit of a hard time right now. He told me he didn't think that he had the same kind of condition as he had in the Amstel Gold Race a couple of years ago when he finished second, and last year when he also popped up with second place as well. But with Armstrong, it's always very difficult to tell. It's really a question of super motivation, and I think he will dig very deeply today into his resources to try and stay as close to George Hincapie as possible, because Hincapie is doing everything right.
He is, and he's obviously inspired, but he's giving himself a very tough ride. He's tried his best to keep this race under control, but I think they've lost the control of it just now. But as long as Hincapie can profit from the manoeuvres of the other teams, everybody's losing teammates now, of course. It's down to the leaders now to show what they can do in Flanders. But look at the route still to go forward. The climbs like the Tyenberg, Eichenberg, Leberg, Berendries, and then, of course, the Muur itself and the Bosberg. It is a fearsome end to this race.
It really is. It's changed a lot over the last couple of years, and I think they've made it much more exciting by keeping all of the climbs so close together. But it also is very difficult for anybody to control the race by putting all of the climbs in such a successive nature, because you have to be alert all of the time. Any time over the next 53 kilometers the winning break could form. That's why you have to be absolutely alert for the next hour and a quarter.
Now, still the lone figure, blazing a trail across Flanders, and he's Belgian, Erwin Thijs, at 31 years of age. Little bit of respite, even if it is over cobblestones. Well, at this moment, when you're happy the roads are dry, this would have been a very dicey left-hander over the railroad. If it had been raining today, at least they put some tarmac down there. but his old legs now as he keeps this big gear churned out. Back to the chase. It looks like we've got 5 men here, and tagged on the back, it looks like Lance Armstrong.
I think it is Armstrong. Looking at that position there, he's riding a defensive position here for George Hincapie, and he's found himself on the attack right now, but he's keeping true to his word right now, Phil. He is sitting on the back, but there's always a big possibility that if the race develops, Armstrong could end up being the leader of the team.
From the helicopter there, Paul, I could see he was actually on his radio. He sort of was saying probably to George, come on up here, mate, it's fewer riders.
Absolutely. Well, we'll get a chance to go down there in a few moments' time. The lone leader very shortly will be on the slopes of the Tyenberg, which itself is a very difficult climb, almost as steep as the Paterberg and the Koppenberg, and that will be the climb where we will once again see this group starting to split up. It looks now as if there's an awful lot of tactical manoeuvring going on between the big leaders. The team who need to take responsibility right now are Team Mappé, who I reckon on a quick calculation have still got 5 riders in this group, but it looks as if it's going to be Fassa Bortolo who take over control, but it's not.
19 riders, looks like Bortolami. 19 riders here in this little group at the moment as they make their way. It's Balducci, I think, who's heading the field here for Tacconi Sport. 19 riders. Then we've got Lance Armstrong in that little interesting split as we approach the Steenbeek Dries climb, and the gap continues to come down, heading up to the 5-minute advantage now for Erwin Thijs. He should still be clear for the next couple of little hills first. There's the group containing Armstrong, and there's Armstrong sitting at the back of the group here, and it looks as I think in fact it's Hincapie, isn't it? It is Hincapie this, so he's got the right man across to the back. So, and content to sit there at the moment as they assess the breakaway. Now this little rider here who we have breakfast with this morning, Gabriele Misaglia, is looking very sharp.
Hincapie's got a bit of a problem there. He keeps looking down. I think it may well be that his gears are jumping slightly, and this is a bit of an unfortunate moment for him to be there because the car behind is a neutral server. There you see the hand has gone up. He hasn't got his team car behind him, and I'm not sure what the problem is. He's pointing down there, and it sounds as if something's rattling quite badly.
Well, let's hope
it's a rear wheel puncture, I think.
He won't get away with that. He might be able to hang on with a mechanical, but with a flat tire he's had it on this climb. We've got Erwin Thijs here now, further on as he starts this tough climb of the Tyenberg. This is the one that many of the Tourist Routier riders yesterday, and remember there were 15,000 of them, found this, they reckon, the hardest climb of the whole day. Well, for Erwin Thijs, he might be echoing those thoughts right now, but then he has been in the lead for 200 kilometers.
I'm Christian Vanderveld, and you're watching World Cycling Productions.